We're going to pull in the team right now for some pre-debate prep. Here, I'll make myself, make myself visible there. Brilliant. All right. Hey, Sirius.
Hey.
Hey, we're gonna pull in everybody else.
Yep. Do I sound okay, by the way?
Maybe boost yourself a little bit if you can.
Boost myself? Okay.
Just a little bit, yeah.
How's that?
It's good.
Oh, wait.
How do I sound now?
You sound swell. Okay.
Okay.
There we go.
I made sure that my microphone was correct.
Good. Okay, nobody else is answering the call, which is fine.
Yep. I'll be here soon, I'm sure.
I'm sure. How are you feeling?
Nervous, because I've never done a panel before, but I'm sure once it starts, I'll feel better. And
You've been on panels before. You've been on my panels.
oh, right. I've been on. Okay, that's true. Sunday Showdown is like a thing that I've been on. Though it hasn't felt as high stakes, I guess, because not many people watched the Sunday Showdowns.
Hey, we had a couple hundred.
That's fair. I mean, to be fair, I enjoy doing the Sunday Showdowns, even when
Hey,
people...
you're not salvaging this. I am permanently slighted.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
A lot of the people who joined those were kind of stupid, though.
What,
I remember
Liquid Zulu stupid. Come on.
Yeah. Liquid Zulu and all his buddies.
Did he have buddies?
Yeah, he had buddies. I remember because like I asked them, you know, should you, if somebody is on the road on the private road and they're jaywalking, should you just run them over? I don't know if Liquid Zulu said yes, but one of his buddies definitely did say yes to that. It was quite interesting. Deeply unserious people, those libertarians.
I miss Max the Confessor. That was a fun one.
Oh, Max. I do remember Max a couple times. I don't remember what she argued, but Hey, Daedalus.
Hey, Daedalus.
Hey, Sirius. Hey, Sunday. All right, let's get this stream.
Eudaimonia, we are on the pro-violence side. We're all about violence.
Yeah, rah revolution. Let's do it. I love violence. It's my favorite thing to do. I mean, personally, I don't know. I'm temporarily suspending my qualms with violence as a term for this debate because.
Oh, I don't think you should. I think you should have it all
Well,
in your arsenal.
I mean, yeah, but it's gonna get really frustrating if I just say everything is violence. Like, you know, talking is violence, and you know, doing any kind of communication is violence. Because I don't know, that I feel like that will just quickly get off the point. So. I'm happy to problematize it within reason, but not to the point where I'm saying that, you know, actually, if you talk to somebody, you're doing violence against them.
Oh, sorry, I have somebody else here.
I figured.
Andrew Wilson. That was the debate with the Crucible debate, right?
We have performance-enhancing drugs underway, so we're just waiting on this. Okay, cool. 5 minutes to it.
Legally, I could do performance-enhancing drugs now.
What's that?
I could legally do performance-enhancing drugs now. I'm not going to. Oh, actually, just a second. Just a quick thing. Sunday, should I change my profile picture to...
The thing that people actually recognize from your channel? That might be a good decision at some point.
Okay, I mean, should I just do it now? Like, I can just do that now.
It's up to you.
I'll just do it now. Let's see if it will let me. Edit user profile. Will it change dynamically on stream?
I don't know though. You might lose your recognition in the highly lucrative Geometry Dash.
It's funny. My Twitter profile is this.
It was on the way.
It doesn't. I'll see. The Geometry Dash is bigger than you'd think. It is seriously. It's like I think it's been in the top 10 most downloaded apps for forever, basically at this point.
I bet Farmville did better.
No, Farmville hasn't been there for forever. It's outlasted.
I don't think I thought about Farmville in a decade.
Oh, well.
Apply, save changes. Let's see if it
That's
works.
why I'm here, to provide the illusion of culture.
Seems like it worked.
It does. You're very white, though, which I mean, I suppose is representative.
It's funny. I don't know how to change that, so
don't worry about it. It's distinctive.
That's fair.
You're the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man against Egon Spengler.
Definitely not this. It does. Now who's gonna remember the slights? Come on, Sunday. I don't know.
Let's see. Wick only did okay against Andrew, which is better than I was expecting. I talked to Wick after that debate, and I think we both agree that Andrew did worse than Wick did better. That was an astonishingly bad performance by Andrew. I think he made the assumptions I assumed he was going to make. Which I warned him against, actually, weirdly enough. He assumed that it would be settled just by establishing that all politics involves violence, and therefore by definition. And granted, he has like a weird understanding of what that means. So when he thinks all politics involves violence, he's talking in terms of all protest involves some appeal to state enforcement, which is not true.
Yeah.
Which is not true. Like sometimes it's just purely expressing displeasure at state action. Mm-hmm. And there is no attempt to appeal to state enforcement. Sometimes it's towards the opposite. It's just like, hey, state, lay off of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, sometimes it's state don't do a thing, like don't be part of the IMF or something like that.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, I would say inactions are still actions, but it's like, I sometimes protests don't even appeal to the state at all. Like, if you have a protest about, people's behavior, like we think that people should stop doing X, Y, Z, it doesn't necessarily appeal to state power at all. Like, I know, I think a lot of, most temperance type people have given up on trying to bring prohibition back, right? And so they advocate for more modest things like personally limiting your alcohol.
Although you could run afoul of his definition then, because under those conditions, you could be easily construed as appealing to enforcement against these behaviors by somebody, and that somebody could inclusively involve the state as well.
Yeah, I don't know, but then it just kind of becomes a little uninteresting, right? Like,
off. You want it cold?
I think the one thing he did point out was that that he was right about is that he was right that in Chenoweth's book,
yes.
Violent versus nonviolent is actually a question of armed versus not armed.
It is, but what he misses, though, is that that's not dogmatically the case. It's not a statement that violence versus nonviolence is armed versus armed. What's happening, though, is because violence and nonviolence are ambiguous, they're switching over to something that's less ambiguous.
I'm aware, Sunday. I sent you the paper that says that.
I know you did. I know you did. But I'm saying Wick missed that.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes, and the audience has not seen our paper.
That's true. That's true.
All 20 of them.
All 20 of them. Are you streaming right now? Because I've got 126.
Yeah.
No, I said all 20 papers. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you meant all 20 members of my audience.
No, there's more than 20. There's 130.
Two Daedalus.
If I got 20 people in my audience, I'd be doing a little jig and making people pay me for it.
God.
I think I had 20 viewers on Twitch before, but...
Ooh, moving up in the world.
I know. It was a while ago. It was playing Geometry Dash. The game you keep poo-pooing.
I don't poo-poo Geometry Dash. I just find it weird how you all want to kill each other over redoing some tropes in your level design. You guys are like beating each other up like Gordon Ramsay.
Oh, that's true. This is so true.
Over level edits in a phone game.
It's a PC game too.
Oh, it's
Most
a
peop-
PC
most-
game too. Okay, sorry, my mistake.
Yeah, most of the people play. Most of the people who are like big in the community play on.
Sorry,
PC.
did I slight the dignity of Geometry Dash?
Oh, absolutely not. There's nothing you can do to slight the dignity of Geometry Dash that the developer and community don't do extensively. Like, it's look. I'm not saying that it's a technically good game in terms of its programming or in terms of that kind of stuff. I would say it's pretty far from that. But, I enjoy the creativity it gives me.
So Vaush has said, by the way, for people in the chat wondering why on earth we're spending here talking when there's 8 minutes apparently till 5. Vaush is taking his new kitten to the vet, so he's probably going to be between 20 and 30 minutes late, which is fine by me. What are your guys' Oh, thank you, Bird Brain, for the $10. I really appreciate that. Oh, you a beer. Hope SA Productions is treating you well. It is, actually. I should have a lot more out fairly soon.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to listen on 2 times speed.
Oh, yeah. I hate you.
So you get the 20-minute video done in 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just...
That serious is a moment for the slightly edgy efficient.
efficient.
Yeah. Predictions for the opposition. I'm actually completely in the dark about Loner Box. I know that I talked to him prior to this, and he seemed ambiguous. So
I don't know what Lonerbox is going to say. I've talked to Lonerbox twice at this point, neither of which were about violence. I think he's going to probably take a pretty non-committal position. It's just going to be like, yeah, some of the literature I've read says that violence is, or non-violence is more effective than violence. I don't know. There's not much more to say, etc. Like, I don't think that he's going to have this like really strong commitment, especially given that he's a fill-in for Sulfur.
And
Eudaimonia, I have not seen
pretty
Barbie yet, no, but I will soon. Looking forward to that more than Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer looks like a dirge. I think Loner Box is going to be the more difficult person to wrangle with in the debate, simply because he's going to give enough leeway to our side that there's actually going to be some wrangling taking place. I have a feeling Wick and I don't know Professor Meat at all, but my suspicion is they're going to be pretty obstinate.
Yeah, I have no idea who Professor Meat is.
Whatever you do, don't Google Professor Meat.
Yeah, I made that mistake already.
I thankfully haven't, because I have very little interest in him. But
I don't know what Professor Meat's going to go at it. I think Lonerbox is probably just going to chart a middle of the road kind of course, and Wick is probably going to do the exact same argument he did. He was pretty attached to it when I talked to him about it.
Yeah,
when did you talk to him about it?
The night after, the same night of his debate with Andrew, actually.
Oh, is it on stream or?
No, I talked to him about it in DMs.
Eudaimonia, I mean, they can see that, but like, who cares? It's like.
Should y'all be talking strategy live? Well, okay, so that's what you're responding to. I would agree if there was more than 20 minutes to go. And I'm not discussing we haven't discussed our strategy yet. We're discussing their strategy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, look, it's. I am not super concerned about them gaming us. Like, I don't think that.
Yeah, you are. You've been the most nervous of all of us so far.
Okay, but that's. I'm not. No, I'm nervous about other things besides them gaming us. Like, I don't get the impression that Lonerbox is the kind of person who would watch a stream of us preparing it so that he could like find all the dishonest counter arguments, and I don't think Wick is like that either. I mean, Professor Meat is the wild card, but I don't know. It just seems a little.
Watch Professor Meat just wipe the floor with all of us. He was the
that
one
would
we
be
were
really
expecting.
funny.
Don't do that to Sirius.
I'll be okay. I don't know. I'm happy about the preparation we've done. At least I'm happy with the preparation I've done. I feel like I have a solid position that I can argue.
Have you timed your opening statement to 2 minutes?
Yeah,
Good.
yes, I think so. Yes. Yeah, it's under 2 minutes. We're good.
Nobody's opening statement was that long, so I think you should be okay.
Well, mine was just slightly longer than Sirius's, and I timed mine to just under 2 minutes when I recited it, so...
Yeah, I should be fine. You tend to talk slower than I do, anyway, so...
That is not true.
You don't think so?
I talk very fast.
Fair enough. Guess
Especially
we'll
when
see
I feel
then.
like I'm on a deadline.
Right. And I stand corrected.
But yeah. So now we wait. Let's, I'm curious about what's happening on Wik TV right now. Are they doing the
He
same
is
thing?
talking to that weirdo Omar.
Who's the weirdo Omar?
He was the guy who was in the panel on American Hegemony with me that yelled and screamed about how great Saddam Hussein was.
Here, let's take a look at this.
I've sort of been more of always
Look
been
at
more of the well, none of the reasons
check
I'm hearing why this.
Sunday. Check DMs.
Check DMs.
Yeah. Check the group chat. Someone's asking a question.
Group chat. Everyone friend everyone else. We're gonna do this in a group chat. That way,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we actually. I think all of us. We don't all need to be friends. We just need to be friends with you for that to work. I don't think I'm friends with a lot of the people in the prep, but we all. Oh, hi, Dow.
Oh, there
Hey,
you
Doe.
are. Speak of the devil.
Alright.
Good. Let me just.
No,
boost your
that's
volume
Demon
a little
Mama.
bit.
You got the wrong person.
No, but Doe's
What?
Doe's the one pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah, but you said speak of the devil, so I'm just.
Here, Doe, try speaking
Okay.
again. You're a little low.
Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody?
That's great.
Going well.
Is that coming through clear to all you guys? Chat, let me know.
Too bad.
Sounds fine on my end. So
Lakesider Miners, thank you for the $2. Project Arrhythmia is better than Geometry Dash. Shots fired.
what is Project Arrhythmia?
Greed, thank you for the €10. I've been going through a reading list on the server, and it's been good so far. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to be updating that soon. Somebody actually requested a new version of that. So that'll be there in the near future. It'll either be a stream or... I'll probably just give it in a pre-recorded video form.
Okay. Looking up Project Arrhythmia, it seems like a completely different game from Geometry Dash. So
That's why it's better.
Jeez.
Okay, wait. Do we know is Vaush gonna be streaming this on his end?
I don't
He
know.
shall-
I would
yeah.
hope so. I'd hope so.
He is.
Yes, he is.
His stream preview thing says
Hosting big 3v3 debate. There you go. Then rambling about
Yeah,
Barbara.
on-
Shit.
it says
On
3v3
dot,
debate
dot,
on
dot.
something.
Something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Apparently he doesn't
That's
know
probably-
what's going on.
That's probably accurate.
Maybe he just
Yeah,
didn't want to put violence in the
Look,
in the
he's just,
title.
we know he's going to be on Tinder the entire time anyways, so it's okay.
That's what I said.
Or what's the horse version of that?
The horse version.
Hey,
Yeah.
I don't think I want to find out.
I
Yeah.
feel like just called hoof.
That encompasses way more than horses.
Yeah.
Bridal.
Well, I mean, it's a progressive platform, though.
Yeah, exactly. But do you know how long it took me to understand that like a match on Tinder was also supposed to be a pun for like lighting a match? Like,
Oh
it's-
God.
Is it?
I
yeah,
had no idea.
No,
I
that-
didn't even
well-
think about that.
Well, hang on, but that's bullshit, though, because people have been talking about matching in terms of setting relationships up since
Sure, but
Yeah,
Tinder may
I
come
don't-
second,
Mulan
right?
times.
You know, like
I don't
you know
think
about
that's necessarily-
matchmaking.
Yeah,
Tinder
I
is
don't
a
think that's
matchmaker.
necessarily a deliberate choice on their part.
That's true.
Uh,
It might not be. I don't know.
Well, no, Tinder's not a matchmaker. Tinder is a match. Tinder's not even a match
Of
igniter.
course.
Tinder's a... Hang on. What the fuck
Yeah.
is Tinder? Okay, this is the new debate
Oh,
topic.
no, okay. Kindling is what you get to like start the fire. Tinder is what you throw in to like let the kindling go up a little bit. And
Dry
then,
flammable materials is wood or paper used for lighting a fire. They slash that. Yeah, so Tinder doesn't make matches. Matches contain...
No, of course. But the website Tinder, the
Yes.
program Tinder is a matchmaker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they might be trying to plan that, but I don't know. It's gross. Don't get me wrong.
Naomi Chance, thank you for the $5 for ton. Brother,
I can always appreciate a good pun.
Apparently, Hinge is the place to be now, anyway.
Chat.
I don't use any of those.
I don't know what Hinge is. Is that like?
Chat, let us know if the audio is balanced. Okay.
I have moved at least the same stream 3 times because Hetman has been going on so many dates off of Hinge lately. So I'm just going. You never believe that there's a crisis in dating apps for men, apparently, by talking to him. But here we are.
Potential matches allowing users to dismiss uploading user-generated content in a variety of formats, such as photos, videos, and prompts, as a way to express personality and appearance.
I have no idea what you guys are doing. Let's see. Wick is
oh my god!
Stream at the moment.
Holy shit! All of the dating services. Oh my god! It's always incredible.
They're all owned by one company.
They're
or at
all
least
owned by Match
companies.
Group. They're all owned by Match Group. Like it's the same with everything. Like it's so funny how so much of the quote unquote competition in these markets, like any market, is just between subsidiaries of the same big company. Like I think it's that way with glasses. It's that way with everything these days.
Grocery stores, same 3 big companies.
Yep.
Okay.
It's all the illusion of competition.
Wick, any or not Wick, Doe. God, I can't believe I mixed you two up. Doe, never forgive me for that. First of all, but secondly, any predictions for the opposition?
Oh god. The only one I've seen really talk about this is Loner Box for a little bit, but that was like through the prism of genocide conversations.
Oh, brilliant.
And so like that was radically changing how people were approaching it.
Yeah.
And I watched the Wick Big Papa Fascist debate. And I mean, Wick was trying to explain himself for a time, but the obstinacy of Big Papa Fascist stopped that from being like enough for me to be able to like get a good read on what Wick was going for. But judging from like the sources and stuff that we've looked at, that we know that like he's using and stuff like that, like I don't know. A lot of it I think is going to be on like efficiency. You know, what's efficient, pragmatic for a mass movement to do or whatever.
Yeah. One move that I saw him try to make was that he said he doesn't care if you call things violence or non-violence. He just wants to, quote, make the point that some things are more effective than, like, some tactics are more effective than other tactics, whether or not you want to call them violent or non-violent. I mean, I think that, well, actually, that would be tipping my hand a little bit. But that's one of the moves that I think he's going to make.
Don't let them know your secret weapon, Sirius.
I don't know. Now I'm I've been instilled with a healthy sense of paranoia.
We know their plan. Everyone, rewrite your opening statements fast.
Yes.
In 25 minutes.
Do you think? How many of these people wrote an opening statement? Do you think?
Like, I think all of them have now, right? Because
I hope so.
To it,
well, I would hope so. It's been.
That would be really. That would be like really funny if most of them did.
They just kind of riff on it.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing Destiny would do. It might also be the kind of thing Loner Box would do, but I'm not sure.
No, my experience of Loner Box is he generally prepares.
Okay.
If he does riff on it, it's because the debate he's done like a gazillion times before.
He is getting pulled in last minute, which is why I thought it might be.
Yeah, but he's done this topic before. This isn't new to him.
Yeah.
And Some Noir, thank you for the $5 for the press and assembling quite the team. I am reading a super chat. Serious silence.
Sorry.
I demand discipline. They're saying you have an audio delay, Sirius, which strikes me as odd, given that you're the only one not on camera. I don't know how on earth they would determine that.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
No, Sirius just keeps on talking. Sirius doesn't have an audio delay.
Hey, Brooks.
Hey, Brooks.
Bye, Brooks, I guess. Brooks, you're muted.
I know. I'm walking around the streets of New York. You want all the background noise? Let's do it. Fine, I'll join.
Let's do it.
How you doing?
Okay. Don't get hit by a vehicle. I mean, do it.
Yeah.
It'll get me
care. Why
views
do you
for
care about
days,
that?
but
And don't
Why
get
is this not
doxxed,
working?
man.
What
Remember to say I'm walking here.
What the fuck? Come on, flip camera around. There we go.
Hey.
Oh,
I like your shoes. But oh, you went for the highlights.
no.
No?
What?
Didn't you get? Isn't your
No,
beard-
there's no color.
Is there not? What's that silver in your beard?
No, that's called being old and
Oh,
gray,
I'm
asshole.
sorry.
Like, and he's like, you got highlights in your beard. Asshole.
Oh,
Fucking
man.
children, man. What are you gonna do with them, right? So, yes.
I noticed when I cut my hair this last time, it's definitely noticeably gray now in places. So that's fun.
All right, I cut 7 inches off mine. This is literally all of it. There's no more top knot bun for me.
It's looking good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works. It seems to have been a good choice during all the fun of work. I get to look professional.
We're just floating predictions. How do you think this is gonna go?
Oh, poorly, but I think you guys will do well. No, I mean it's not saying you won't do well. I'm saying you'll do well, but it is like I've watched. I think all of you debate someone, and you all have points you care about, and you forget these other people are not only far less intelligent, but they also don't actually know what they care about, and so it's a lot like Doe, like what you got going on. Like, I get it. You're laying down exactly the shit that I love, 100%. I don't get to have conversations with people. I know that because they don't get it. Their brains don't work. That's the end of the sentence. So you guys are going to go in. I'll see you guys tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Brooks. See ya. Stay safe out there.
See you soon.
What? Not you.
Oh.
My employees.
Oh.
Capitalist, thank you.
Oh, you're. Oh, damn.
Oh no, you have no idea. It's been a very long few days. I am the asshole. But like Loner Box's tactic is to basically focus on a handful of things that he believes that you, whether you're Doe, whether you're President Sunday, whoever you are, he will focus on a handful of things that he believes you don't have a good grasp of so he can seem smart. That's his tactic. But he doesn't understand or believe in anything. He is an empty human. So when he's going about it, like, just stick to what you're saying. People don't let him dance around you. Wick is worse. Wick is going to do that. Let me ask you. Let me ask you. Look, President Sunday, let me ask you. I'm just curious, like, if we were to put all of the babies in the world in a blender, would you let me finish. Would you press the button? And I'm just asking because I just want to get to a point. That's like his thing.
Oh my god, you were talking in his cadence too. That was so good.
Okay,
you started that off with a hey gang, it'd have been perfect.
Okay, but clarifying question: would doing so abolish sex for all time?
I don't know if I'm. I don't know if I would. I don't.
You're not doing the Egon Spengler voice. That's the problem.
I don't know if I care about Sunday. Let me talk. I don't know.
I think his voice is spot on.
That was good.
I don't think it's sex that's really the big deal. I think when we are talking about these things, we just need to make sure no one's getting hurt.
Okay, but I'm really only concerned with abolishing sex here. So.
Your piano did not come through, sadly.
I think we can.
I intentionally made sure it didn't.
I think we could. I think we could find a middle ground on abolishing. Look, as long as we Sunday, let me talk. Like this is his whole thing is this over and over.
Okay, look, answer me this, Mr. Box. Of those babies in the blender, how many would you categorize as molds and how many as fungus?
It's not. That's not Box. That's.
I'm not doing more Wick.
Oh, is that Wick?
And,
I lost. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All of you white people look the same to me.
There's three. There's Wick. There's Box, and there's Professor Meat.
I know nothing about Professor Meat.
Box talks a little bit more, like a little serious. Again, he's got nothing though. Like when he's arguing.
Not endorse this characterization.
I'm not endorsing this either. This is entirely on Brooks.
That's fine. I don't
disavow.
Care. What you guys have is positions that not only do you care about, but you've thought of, you've looked into stuff. I've watched what you've gone into. You care about why you came to these conclusions, how you got there, and that there's a principle or something you can follow. Stick with that. Don't let them dance around. The liberal mentality is to find minuscule, tiny things of threads, pull the thread, and act like they're, wow, a thread came out. I mean, I'm just shocked. When you just go, look, no, we're talking about the fucking jacket. Fuck off with the thread. Are you going to come back? Don't let them control it. As long as you do that, you literally will come out. It'll be hilarious.
Okay.
Thank you, Birdbrain, for the $2. How much to fund an entire impression debate? That's basically what this is already.
I no longer advocate for taking them at their word, or I ruined Sunday's life by putting him up against Haas, and by saying that he needed to take him in good faith.
That was, by the way, that 4-hour thing. That was his fault. That was 100% him.
Oh my god!
I'd say, and he's not joking.
I was gonna murder him, but no, we have to choose the path of love for Haas in particular.
I no longer advocate for this position.
Me neither. You convinced me.
But I think it was fun. It was a good test.
It was definitely educational.
No, it wasn't.
I saw some of like Haas's old writings posted on Twitter, like when he was in like from his college days or something.
The guy's not stupid.
Yeah.
He's not stupid.
No.
He could have done so much.
But here's the thing. I also wouldn't advocate the same thing for these guys because Haas is not stupid. These guys are.
I wouldn't say Loner Box
is not stupid.
I think Loner Box.
We have different definitions of how intelligence works.
We do.
Okay.
Well, actually, in this particular case, I don't think so though, because I think Loner Box is smart. Actually, this is going to sound weird, but in a similar way as I think Haas is. I think Loner Box has.
Oh.
I think Loner Box, like Haas, has sort of been compromised by his position, where there are areas he disdains to go because of how he has sort of situated himself politically. That's my general read on him. But I don't think he doesn't get this, though.
Haas cares. Loner Box has nothing to care for. So they may be both intelligent, however you may say it, but there's nothing at the center of his arguments. When you watch him, he's ultimately coming back to sort of an everyone gets along the bullshit thing. And that we need to understand our opponents and that we need to, and it's like, oh Christ, with Haas, again, Haas is fucking wild, but his like mega communism nightmare bullshit and all this other stuff comes from a deeply misinformed place, but he's trying to get at something. So I would even give Haas the edge in that.
I don't know, man. Like some of the, he's smart, but some of the positions he adopts are really fucking stupid.
Well, I would. Like, I
don't even consider stupid. I'd say they're insanely fucked up because he's kind of broken. Like,
but I don't even fucked up. Like, what about like his thing of like adopting Lysenkoism? Like, I don't understand how you can adopt Lysenkoism.
Well, very easily by not having any background in biology whatsoever. Correct. And picking it up because other people in your sphere do. I think the problem with Haas is, here's why I disagree with Brooks a little bit, because I think the problem with Haas is sort of identical. I think early Haas, maybe you'd have a point. I think current Haas, I think it's entirely grift now. I don't think he's stupid enough to adopt even a fraction of his current positions.
Yeah, Haas is very constructed in his positions.
But again, underneath it all, the main point, you guys you care about what you're saying, you actually have things you believe in that are strong, they're well thought out, they're deep, philosophical, interesting, and they're not identical. The three of you, I think, are all pointing towards the same general position, which makes it work. You're not coming at it the same way, and you care about different parts of it. And that is going to make you guys incredibly strong as a team. It's going to make you each have the upper hand. Just don't allow them to do the trick of rabbit holing down some detail.
You're just very quickly. Naomi Chance, thank you for the $2. You know what? Have $2 more bucks. Good luck, Domingo.
Are we live on your
Appreciate
stream?
That. We are indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did I just say all of this live on stream?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
That's
You
now permanent record.
Before.
Yeah, we said we literally said we're on stream. We are all on.
Well, great.
It's been a long day, Brooks.
It doesn't matter.
Alice Payne, thank you for
This
the
is
$2.
Sunday. You've
Bofa.
done this to me now like 3 times.
What do you mean done this to you? We said in the chat. You said still off stream ? Serious. We're on stream. Dataless Media. We are all on. Like
No. Oh yeah. Okay. I only saw the word on screen.
Okay, Brooks, after this is over, just review this little segment. If anything got compromised, you need me to cut it, I'll do that later, okay?
No, I don't care about any of these people.
Okay.
You know how I feel about Wick? Like,
No, tell us about Wick. Tell us how you feel about Wick, Brooks.
you want me? The one time I've talked to him on stream, you saw what happened. Like, my opinion's clear.
That didn't go well.
Yeah, but do it again.
No.
wait, what happened on stream?
The simple fact, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll say it a million times. You guys have the stronger, smarter position. You care about what you're going for. Yet you're up against people who I don't think actually have a position other than the liberal normative position of violence bad or whatever the fuck that means. And stick to it. Don't let them pull you down a rabbit hole. And remember the big thing. You're not here for me. You're not here for yourselves. And you're not here to convince them. You're here for the audience, the 15-year-olds watching.
I'm here for you, Brooks.
Just remember that. Just remember that, and you'll do great. You guys are all way brighter than all these people. But it's true. Even you, serious.
Even you,
Even
serious.
me. Thanks. Thanks, Brooks. That means so much to me.
No, it doesn't.
All right, let's see what Wick's doing. Hang on.
I hope he's reviewing our stream.
That'd be
Watching
fun.
it a lot.
Crying.
Oh my god.
Trying to get some intel.
Hawes's pre-stream, or not Hawes, Vaush's pre-stream is up, so he should be up soon. I desperately need to go to the washroom. This is excellent timing. Looks like Professor Meat and Sulfur are chatting. Oh, is Sulfur back on now?
Wait, is it not going to be Lunar Box then?
Maybe not. I think that's Sulfur. It could be somebody else.
Hang on,
Where?
let's check what Wick's Twitter is saying.
It'll be good if it is Sulfur.
I would much rather debate Sulfur.
Just because she's actually like prepared for this.
Yeah.
I don't think that's Sulfur.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it is Sulfur.
Is that Professor Meat though?
So the guy who looks, yeah, that's may be Professor Meat.
Okay. We don't have Sulfur in the group chat, so that would be odd.
Yeah, I mean, you're the one who made the group chat, so...
Yeah, but Wick added Professor Meat.
Wick may be doing the same thing of just having a bunch of people on. It's not like I'm in the debate or Daedalus is.
Yeah.
Right.
Cowards. Okay, I'm going to the washroom, guys. I'll be right back. You two
No, I just don't
entertain
believe in
chat.
debate. There's a difference.
You don't believe that debates exist? You don't think we're not going to
believe they
go...
serve no purpose whatsoever.
I know, I'm just kidding.
We might as well have like gladiatorial fights to the death with swords in order to dictate things. It's about as good.
It's not really my style.
I see you agree with Haas now.
Yes, I'm with Haas on this one. Gladiatorial fights in order for Congress to pass laws, I think is a...
It's fucking...
I mean, they'd have to believe in it, so it's a start. It's not like they're going to go in there because they don't believe it.
I don't know about that. Lauren Boebert might. She's not the
Yeah.
brightest bulb.
Yeah, and
In the
you're
marquee sign.
kind of giving an advantage to the able-bodied. It's not really fair, I don't think.
Yeah, let's be honest. The first time this happens, much of Congress is decimated because they're all 80 years old.
Yeah.
Fair.
Hey, I'll be right back.
Everyone's leaving. It's great.
I'm coming
Quick
right
chat
back.
check
Sorry.
if
Right then.
gladiatorial. Yeah, gladiatorial is a real word.
Gladiatorial absolutely is a word, Imran. And if you disagree with me, we can have a sword fight to settle it.
What's the OED? Oxford English Dictionary.
What is OUD?
OED. It's Oxford English Dictionary.
Like oud? The smell oud? What an OUD? What are we talking about? But you guys will do great. It doesn't matter. You're gonna do good, Sirius. It's gonna be fun.
Thank you.
I mean, Sunday will be terrible.
I don't think he's got his headphones in yet.
He does.
Couldn't
And
hear
I'm gonna
you.
do that. Now we're good. There we
Back.
go.
Yeah, there we go.
What did I miss?
Nothing.
Okay.
Also, for the record, it is in the OED, gladiatorial, of or pertaining to gladiators.
Of course, it's a word.
Yeah.
Did I say it wasn't?
Gladiatorial
No. I was talking to chat.
Chat was
talking to
asking.
Chat. Yeah.
Was chat? Oh God, I'm gonna have to go back and read chat.
Oh, hi, Chariot. I didn't. Not really.
Oh, hey, Chariot. How you doing?
Yes,
All right.
anyone could take Shadiversity in a sword fight because you know why? He wears a Gambison hoodie.
Shadiversity. Where do I know that name? from?
Shadiversary, he's the guy who talks about matriculations and does the, he does, like, medieval weaponry and siege stuff.
Oh my god,
Kind of
that
fiddly.
guy.
So he does that,
Yes.
and then he also bitches about women in movies.
Yeah,
on the side.
he bitches about SJWs or whatever. Like,
It's a shame because I liked him, and then I found out that's what he did.
yeah, it is a shame because like he's made some interesting cogent videos. I think like his video on the specifics of how like Midjourney and such work is better than any other explanation I've seen. Like it's certainly better than those memes people share around where it's like they think it's just making a collage or whatever. But he's otherwise just a fucking idiot. So
You know who has an absolutely ridiculous knowledge of medieval warfare is Leo.
I'll go watch that Midjourney video because I still haven't seen anyone describe it accurately how it functions. So we'll see if someone finally gets it right.
yeah.
Oh, YouTube never change. I'm gonna go join chat from the audience and stop embarrassing myself horrifyingly. You guys are lovely. You guys will all kick ass. Well done, well done, well done. Kick it ass. Do
care,
it. Do it up.
All right.
Who wants to listen on Wick badmouth us while we're waiting?
Oh, sounds
Okay.
great.
All right, let's do it.
Why not?
He's
Is
doing
he-
pretty well for us. I think he's pulled like close to 200 super chats already. Chat, come on, we're looking bad in front of Wick of all people.
That is one thing that Wick is good at is getting people to donate to him.
Well, I don't know if he's
Because I remember whenever
Even
you guys
after the
did
second
Sunday
bomb,
streams,
even after
like,
the Russian invasion of
they-
Manchuria, they were
What?
still a significant
What?
portion of the
We're listening to this.
military who
Watch
did
the
not
stream.
want to give up. So, yeah, you can make the argument both ways. It's really
Yeah.
hard to-
I tried asking.
Oh, we're doing
last week
A-bomb
in-
stuff,
in
which
your
has held me
Discord.
enraged me
I think
all
it was your
week.
Discord, or it was like I go
Oh,
to
Jesus
bed. obviously
Christ, this
very
redolent thought
much
person's
Another
donated
before
like
$50 for
$300
Redwood
to
Thought.
him
Get a
already.
nice chair. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. But no, it was if the contention is like bomb bad, obviously, then was the second bomb like is that like which bomb are you
Is that-
debating? Because if
They're
you
talking
That's
about
sulfur.
like, star the first,
Yeah, that is. Wait, that is
Um,
sulfur.
for every reason of bomb bad. But yeah, nobody wanted to play ball with me. Second bomb.
Well, I think
So-
an interesting question, right, is would we have supported the bombing of Berlin if we had developed it?
Yeah, I'm
5
pretty
years
sure that's
before,
sulfur.
right?
That's so
And
strange. Should we
During the height
Should we
of
bring her
Nazi
into
Germany,
the-
if we were
into the
able
group
to
chat,
use
or
it
what?
on Berlin to stop the war and stop the mass killing of Jews? Would we have a problem with that? I don't know if I would. To be clear, I don't know if it would have
Here,
worked.
let's go back a little bit. I want to see what they were talking about before. Yeah, it looks like they have sulfur in the chat, so I don't know what it means that she's not taking
What
part
angle?
anymore.
I haven't even talked to you about the angle that you're coming at.
I can.
Right?
I could.
Turn your camera on.
Do you
Let
want?
the people see
Should
who
we
you are.
ask about it?
Ask about what?
Yeah, that's definitely sulfur. That's definitely sulfur.
Well, we'll know when the debate starts. Doesn't matter.
Well,
So-
we might want to let Loner Box know, right? Like,
I think Loner Box is going to be told, Sirius. I think that's okay.
okay.
I don't think he's going to show up and then be kicked out. But yeah, okay. Let's go back a little bit more. Let's see if they were talking about the upcoming thing at all.
Oh my God, Brooke! Wait, was Wick watching our stream?
Was he? What do you mean?
Well, Brooke says in chat, "Good news, Wick is doing an impression of my impression."
I don't see when he would have done so. I'm not seeing him actually watching our stream on stream.
Icarus in chat.
Okay, serious? I'll respond to chat. It's okay. We don't know if Lonerbox is not going to make it. We don't know. We haven't heard anything. We just saw who looks like Sulfur in Wick's stream. So yeah, that was a joke. Yeah, Brooks was joking. Okay. So it's 20 minutes after. So Vaush was pre-streaming. He's probably... Yeah, he's live now. Okay. So Vaush is live, so we'll probably be going very soon. So I'm going to cut the stream here. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Now we wait.
All right. I'm going to hop off then real quick before you guys get ready. Good luck, everybody. If you're not busy tomorrow, go ahead and tune in. I will be alive with a manual going over a What If Altist video, so you should come suffer with us tomorrow around 6 Mountain Time.
Still haven't watched a What If Altist video.
I have mixed feelings. Well, actually, they're all bad. Anyway, good luck.
See ya.
See ya.
See ya. Okay. All right. I'm going to let you all go. We're going to pop into... Well, we'll hang on until Vaush opens the call on the nonviolence debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just so it's not dead air while we're waiting.
Yep, we'll jump ship once that happens.
Yeah.
Oh, Wick is asking, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I know. I've got the same chat open.
Oh, okay. Can I ask if Sulfur is joining us?
I would just leave it. Because Sulfur's not in the group chat. If Sulfur joins the group chat, then we'll know. But as of right now, Lonerbox is in the chat, and Sulfur calling into Wick does not mean that Sulfur is available for the debate itself. It's possible, for example, that she's free until around this time, and then she's not free.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Just don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about. Lonerbox is probably gonna make it. He was streaming all day. Might mean the opposite, but we'll see.
Well, he was streaming, and his title said non-violence panel.
All right. Well.
Shoot, y'all are tagging me.
Who's tagging you? Why am I hearing Metroid music?
Sorry. That was me.
Okay, I thought that was serious.
No, it was definitely not me. I haven't played piano since I was very young.
You should.
You can feel free, Doe. I thought that was someone's answering machine going off and not realizing it. I know that was an error, but I kind of dug it. Thank you, Naomi. I appreciate that. Some funds from the shadow government. Apparently, Naomi can't stop spending money.
Hell yeah. I love shadow governments.
There are worse places to...
I think,
okay. Everyone get off. You're gone. Go away.
All right, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. That's the whole lineup. Hello, folks.
Hello,
Hello.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm coming into this hot. I don't even know what the debate topic is, but as I understand it,
Wait, you don't?
3, and you've all agreed on 2-minute opening statements. Do I have that correct?
I
Yep.
believe so, unless anyone wants to, come out suddenly with being. Okay, there we go. So it is Loner Box, not Sulfur. We've got all 2-minute opening statements. Loner Box, Wick, and Professor Meat. Are you guys good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Wonderful.
Give me a sec. I'm just trying to get it so everyone on my side can see everyone here. So.
All right.
Yeah, same with me.
Everyone, tame your OBS while you have the moment to.
Okay.
There we go. Chat, is audience all balanced? Damn, Shai Hulud, thanks for the $49.99. Appreciate that.
There's too many people to fit in a picture-in-picture.
I think everything's okay on my end, and I'm sure I'll be told if it's not. So, been a long time coming, Sunday. We've been trying to get this together for 3 weeks now.
Well, you have a very intimidating presence, Wick. So I need to pace it out a little bit.
All right, we're all friends here. Wait, what's the? Hold on, fill me in on the context. Okay, how hot are we coming in?
Well, we intend to publicly strip Wick body and soul down to the metaphysical bones. He will never stream again.
All right. Okay. All right. Wick, how do you feel about that?
I am eager for him to try. It's been a while since I've been able to take the gloves off, so to speak. And it's not often that I actually get to participate in these things. I'm usually hosting these things. So I appreciate you stepping in this role so that I can, as I said, take the gloves off. And,
all right. Okay, seriously, though, what's the debate topic?
We are debating, I would presume, whether nonviolence or violence in protest or political resistance is either efficacious or ethically permissible.
Okay. All right.
Does that seem like a fair representation?
Topic.
Fair enough. Yeah. Fair enough.
It's
right?
fair to me.
I will we'll suss this out in opening statements, I'm sure. But the TLDR it is political violence acceptable and under what conditions will be the debate, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, whose side would like to go first?
I think. Oh, that's a good question. Should we just flip a coin, or do we have a preference?
Well, Bill, I'll just say I'll go first if you want. We'll start this.
Works.
Do you guys have?
Works fine by me. Works.
Yeah.
Suits me just fine.
Also, should
ping pong the
we should
back and forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So one person from one side goes with their opening statement, and then the next person from another side goes. Does that make sense?
Yes. People seem to be confused by this proposal. I didn't see much much comprehension there.
Okay, the proposal.
Okay, hang on. Sorry. So what's being suggested is that Wick goes first, then someone from our team, then someone from his team, and so on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me write this out so we have it all well in order. So, okay, another team. Sunday. And who said they wanted to go first?
Wick did. So it'll be Wick.
Wick wants to go first. Fantastic. So then we'll go Wick, and then who on the other side next?
Me.
Okay, then President Sunday, and then who on Wick's side?
Why don't we just go around the room like Wick, Sunday, Loner, Doe, Meat, and Sirius? It works out.
Flip me and Sirius, and I'm down with it.
Sure. Okay. So me, Sirius, Doe, Wick. I'll do it for you. Professor Meat, Loner Box. Sound good?
No, I was going before Professor Meat. Like almighty.
Oh my god.
Why? Okay, we're making this a lot more difficult.
It doesn't matter. I'm joking. Don't worry.
Okay. Sounds great.
Yeah. Well,
whenever you wanna. Yeah.
Of course, on your go. Go right ahead.
Fair enough. Okay. So, hi. Today I will be talking about political violence. There has been much to do over the last few years about the efficacy or morality of violence in protests, violence in riots, if you will, and violence in political activism in general. Many people have pointed to the fact that the Black Lives Matter movement had riots and things like that, and they will quote MLK, riots are the voice of the unheard. Therefore, we shouldn't be telling people how to protest whose rights are being stripped from them or rights are being taken away from them. I am sympathetic to that. However, I believe that if we want to see serious change, then the data suggests, and intuitively we can figure this out, that nonviolent civil resistance is the path forward. I am not here to argue that violence never works or is never necessary. That's not my argument. My argument is simply that civil resistance is more effective both in democracies and in authoritarian governments and has been since post-World War II. I think that this is a clear situation where if you want to get change done and accomplished, the best way to do that is through nonviolent means. And I would contrast that with peaceful means, because nonviolence does not mean peaceful. Nonviolent civil resistance does create conflict. It does put pressure on various actors and institutions.
Coming up.
Am I 2 minutes up?
Just about, yeah.
Okay. I'll just end it at this. So again, if we're serious about wanting to help people achieve political change, nonviolence is what we should advocate for.
Okay. And rolling to the other team.
I guess I'll just start right now. Thank you, first of all, Vaush, for agreeing to host this. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
So I take the question with which tonight's debate is concerned to be twofold: whether nonviolent or violent resistance is more politically efficacious, and whether the use of violence is permissible ethically. The very terms in which both questions are given are highly problematic, and indeed heavily problematized by the literature on political resistance, which, due to the ambiguity inherent in this word violence, is recently moving away from framing such questions in terms of a violence-nonviolence dichotomy, and is rather concerned with differences of outcome between armed and unarmed political resistance. Given such ambiguities, the claim my side has to defend is comparatively modest and easily defended. Whether or not the disciplined avoidance of violence has been efficacious in some case or other, the classic examples being the Satyagraha movement of Gandhi and the civil rights movement, these are not sufficient to take violence off the table in all or even most cases. For instance, although studies often find that violent resistance can hinder the success of nonviolent movements, leaving aside the ambiguity and inconsistency with which the term violence is treated, this conclusion is frequently arrived at by collapsing the aims of violent fringes, quote-unquote, with that of the larger mainstream movement, potentially erasing the identities and goals of what are in fact distinct movements in themselves. Further, if we consider the success of such movements as those of MLK and Gandhi to be worth the human cost of even some deliberate violence to attain, dogmatically taking violence off the table in all cases would be both anti-pragmatic and unethical. This becomes more obvious when one considers the prior or adjacent violence, which also contributes to political outcomes alongside nonviolent movements, for example, that of the Indian National Army, which made the continued domination of India seem increasingly costly and untenable. In short, while nonviolence is of course always desirable, no sane person would advocate on behalf of violence for its own sake. Violence cannot be written off either strategically or ethically without also deciding that the cause of any movement which cannot prevail without violence is de facto forfeit due to an implicit preference for state power. State power, of course, being enforced by definition with violence. Thank you.
All right, and rolling back to the other side, Loner Box or Professor Meat, who would prefer?
I'll go.
All right.
I think one obvious thing is that everyone from any political persuasion does support violence in some form, right? It just depends on where and when and in what context. For example, I think there's always this impression that people give of liberals as being very averse to violence and more pursuing like civility politics and nonviolence, but that's not even entirely true. If you look at the Ukraine war, liberals they're a united front on arming the fuck out of Ukraine and pushing Russians all the way out. Whereas if you ask people on the left, who would normally expect to be more violent, on that issue, they're like, it's a coin flip of whether or not they're okay with that or if they want to get Ukraine to cede land in exchange for peace. So it depends on where and when. I think because of what happened on Twitter, though, I looked at the whole essay of MLK's letter from Birmingham jail. There's one bit in there that I think is really surprising, not the white moderate bit, but the part where he talks about how he's rejecting the claim that he's an extremist because he talks about how he himself feels like he has to be a moderating voice between complacency on one end of the black community and violence on the other, being the Nation of Islam and black nationalists. And he even says that he's really concerned that if the black nationalist movement grows, then America would descend into a racial nightmare, is what he says. And if you look at MLK's activism, it's like he was incredibly strict and very, very nuanced in his political tactics. He even after they would first exhaust all negotiations with legislators in their particular states that they were going for, and then after that, if that failed, they would go through what was called self-purification, where they would drill people down on the ethics of nonviolence, the morality of it, the pragmatism of it. They would collect knives and weapons from protesters before marches to make sure that no one lashed out. And if you look at that, those 10 years from 1955 to 65, they achieved more in that period than in the 100 years before that. And all those groups, NAACP, SNCC, CORE, SCLC, they all did it by adhering to nonviolence. So, yeah.
Okay. And as we are rolling back around, Doe or Sirius, your preference? Sunday, we're getting some noise from your mic.
Oh, are you? I'll mute myself.
Is it me?
I believe it was Sunday's mic, or maybe it wasn't. Well, whatever the case. Doe or Sirius, whoever prefer.
All right, I'm next up. All right.
Okay.
So, when debating the question of nonviolent resistance, its proponents tacitly assume the role of event organizer, where they're in full control of the tactics used by a social movement. They tend to think in terms of efficiency, a logic of getting the most out of every movement action. However, this sort of thinking tends to miss the organic and unplanned nature of violent action. Whether we like it or not, violence will always be a part of every social movement. The question, then, should be how we think and talk about violence amongst ourselves and to the public. While scholars are often split on the outcomes of violent action, finding differential positive and negative effects depending on the study or classification of violence, one thing they tend to agree on is the fact that what people perceive as violent is highly dependent on the nature of the protest movement and the way it's framed by those who talk about it. Studies consistently find that the framing of a protest event as violent will lessen support for the cause it represents, regardless of the actual nature of the protest. The same event can engender either positive or negative attitudes depending on if it's contextualized as violent. Moreover, scholars consistently find that the perception of nonviolence is dependent on the composition of the protest movement. In the American context, racial minorities are the prime example. Protests comprised mostly of racial minorities are more likely to be seen as violent, even when people are assured that the protests were peaceful. All this is to say that as members of a given social movement, the question of tactical efficacy is almost irrelevant. Tactics emerge outside of any single person's control. In the event of such violence, then, our energy should not be put towards policing our own, but towards seizing and reframing the narrative. Once you've allowed your opposition, those with all the power, to set the terms of engagement, you've lost. It is neither just nor efficient to allow oppressors to dictate the terms of oppression.
Okay, thank you. Up next, Professor Meek.
What's up, y'all? So, doesn't seem like the efficacy of violent protests is taken too seriously in academia, which, to be fair, is some of the criticisms of previous research that was in the sort of steel-manning papers of the position that I was able to find. What little evidence I could find has a variety of pretty major flaws that makes it mostly irrelevant as far as I can tell at best. And even taking that out of the equation doesn't really support, even if I disregard that, the evidence that I can find doesn't really support the conclusion. As far as I can tell, it's one of the most fundamental building blocks of society, this idea that one of the most fundamental appeals of a society, of a civilization, is the idea that you are free from the fear of people coming along and saying, we're gonna fuck your shit up if you don't give us what we want. That's a little crude way of saying it, but I don't really I think that people don't want to live in that world, whether or not they even realize it. I think we tend to intellectualize this issue in a way that sort of makes this out of touch, because I don't really, when I imagine people in the population, I don't really see these people that would be moved by violent protest. I don't really see, even the most fearful among us are more likely to go save me daddy government than to say we'll give these people what they want so that we're going to stop. And even if you're going to argue that violence gets attention to your cause, I don't really see that as a justification for violence, even if it's true in practice, because it seems more like a justification for laziness. Because all that tells to me when I hear that is that it doesn't seem to me there to be any reason to believe that violence is the only way to gain attention to your cause. So it seems to me that if that's a justification, not to put words in anyone's mouth, that's merely a reason that movements ought to be, that otherwise might be violent, ought to be more creative. Any countercultural phenomenon has a natural burden put on it beyond reproach if it wishes to best succeed. If you're trying to dissolve or overthrow an authority or a government, then obviously, like in the case of an actual revolution, violence makes sense. But outside those bounds, I don't think violence is sort of antithetical to sensible protest, as far as I can tell.
Okay, thank you. And now finally, Doe.
Proponents of nonviolence are almost universally not proponents of nonviolence. They are instead majority-minded people who see democracy itself as a greater goal than the plight of any oppressed minority peoples. Martyrdom is the nonviolence dogmatist's path towards justice, especially martyrdom of others. Oppressed peoples are made to play the role of martyr, submit to oppression publicly until the majority's mind is changed. Justice is made when the majority changes its legal structures. Liberal theorists on civil disobedience tell us how much more important it is that the authority structures of the majority are not threatened than the suffering of oppressed peoples defending themselves. Oppressed peoples should be more thoughtful about the sensibilities of the majority, they say, or else is implied. This is not a politics of nonviolence. This is a politics of our violence. The most obvious place to see this at play is in the research done into nonviolent resistance. Despite whatever other problems that arise in trying to delineate violence from nonviolence, damage to property is treated as violence consistently throughout these studies, leaving the construction of property completely out of the frame. The construction of a world by those in seats of power, like strapping murderous highways across every nation, forcing the majority of people to become reliant on cars, machines which poison the air and slaughter 3,700 people and over 1 million vertebrate animals a day, are treated as nonviolent, completely neutral acts. This is the false thesis. We do not see the sensibilities of the majority as a worthy metric for justice, and as such, our allegiance cannot be to nonviolence, legalist structures, or any other political technology deployed to privilege some over others. Our allegiance remains to justice, and it is not just to dogmatically let the innocent get abused.
I would, I guess we're doing opens now. You just kind of go with it.
Yeah.
Very quickly before you go,
can I
Wick.
go before you?
Hang on. I've got one for Vaush. Professor Mead.
I've got.
No, but it's a technical issue. Professor Mead is very
technical. Right. Go ahead.
Yes.
Technical.
Professor Mead is very quiet. Is there any way you can boost your volume?
Yeah.
That is technical. As for everyone talking, 3v3 is a lot of people. Try not to shout over each other too much. If necessary, then we'll start doing turns. But ideally, you could go back and forth without that being necessary. Go on ahead.
I'll just real quick, like the idea of justice. I want to touch on that. So there are two things that were said that I want to touch on briefly. The first is Sirius. I'll go in the order. Sirius mentioned that a lot of the problems with violence is it happens organically. It's not organized. It just kind of happens. You can't really control it. I think that's one of the main issues with violence and violent protests, and is because we know that organization wins in these cases. The more organized, the more tactical, the more coherent a group or a advocacy, minority or whatever is, the more likely they are to succeed. And what violence is a poor tool of communication. No one really knows what you're trying to say. All they're seeing is the big explosions or the bloody noses. And this is why, again, while it might not be just that people have to suffer, it's reality. And so this is how the world works.
Okay, so then what should we do when violence inevitably happens in a protest movement? What should we do about it?
Condemn it vociferously.
Why?
Yeah, why? That seems like a waste of our resources. Like, are we going to go out on the streets and protest the protesters? It seems like our resources are better spent reframing the narrative so that people don't see it as violent.
Typically, the leaders would just, when they've got the next chances, they would say they condemn the riots. I mean, even language of the unheard, in that speech, he condemns violence. Like it's not like you have to make a new protest against it.
You are presuming, though, the presence of an extremely charismatic and influential individual who is capable of actually rallying an entire protest around a single program. When you're not in that kind of situation, it seems to me that you do, in fact, end up simply protesting the protest again, undercutting the momentum of whatever they both have in common.
If you're talking civil rights, that's not entirely the case, because it wasn't just MLK and the SCLC, right? It was also the NAACP, it was the SNCC, it was CORE, it was most of them, right? It was most of these organizations. Some of them did flip towards like a self-defense approach, which is more nuanced, but yeah, they were mostly
you clearly have a much more nuanced, you clearly have a much more developed understanding of the details of that case than I do. But be that as it may, nonetheless, in the absence of these, you still find yourself in that situation. If you don't have organizations with legitimacy and this sort of unitary pull to kind of adhere a multifaceted, widespread group to a single program of action, discipline in nonviolence becomes impossible. And so as a consequence of this, when violence inevitably occurs, if you actually allocate all of your resources towards protesting that, you've undercut the momentum of your movement. There's no way around that.
I
Well,
think
even if we were to accept theoretically, right, this idea that like, which I mean I think is sort of inevitably true. Like even for my side's belief system, if we were to say that, well, let's just convince everyone that they weren't actually violent. Well, sure, I'm sure that would, even according to our worldview, of course that would increase support for it. But doesn't that seems to me that regardless of whether or not it's the case, it seems to me that is simply another reason why more peaceful protests would be better.
Well, there's a flip side. There's a flip side to this that you're very quickly, and then I'll let you go. There's a flip side to this that you're not considering, and that's that even in the event of quote unquote nonviolent protests and the studies that you could refer to in order to determine whether or not nonviolent versus violent quote unquote protests are more efficacious, oftentimes what constitutes a violent or a nonviolent protest is itself radically determined on whether or not, for example, they can people doing the study consider armed versus unarmed to be the distinguishing factor between violent versus nonviolent, or whether, for example, windows being targeted versus persons being targeted indicates violent versus nonviolent. And the bare fact of one or two people out of a crowd of 100,000 smashing a window somewhere can be taken up by the media and used to color a completely peaceful protest, a completely nonviolent protest, as violent nonetheless. And so either way, you still find yourself in the reverse situation, in which a nonviolent protest can be very easily manipulated optically to look like a violent protest, regardless of how disciplined it actually is. And indeed, this did happen with MLK's protests too.
Well,
doesn't that back
did
up?
MLK
Sorry.
make his job easier by being disciplined with his people? Wasn't that why he preached discipline? Like MLK preached and spent so much effort in organizing basically extremely disciplined protesters.
Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. He didn't just organize discipline and nonviolence with his protesters. He also orchestrated the protests, and this is one of the reasons why Malcolm X detested MLK. He also orchestrated a situation in which the most innocent of his protesters, including children, would be in direct confrontations with the police and result in an appalling display to horrify the public. So it's a bit more.
He just putting something on display that's already happening in that state, though.
No, putting the children in the front lines.
He was creating the conditions for that violence to be put on display. Like that was part of the explicit. No, but that was part of the explicit strategy. Was to it was a martyrdom strategy where you go out there and you get beat up in order to draw sympathy towards your cause. It
was a martyrdom strategy, but it wasn't passive. Sorry, Lonerbox.
No, but you're referencing Project C, where they wanted to fill up. It was Bull Connor in Birmingham. They wanted to fill up his jail with kids. I'm pretty sure King objected to that, but it was adopted anyway. But yeah, you're right. Like they did basically say go and confront very racist and very aggressive cops and just let them hit you. But I think their tactic as well was they would specifically get the more seasoned like veterans of the movement to stand in front so they could absorb the blows. So this whole thing about like throwing kids is maybe a little bit like that was like that. I think that happened once. It was even very controversial within the movement.
So I think we're talking around the issue here, and that is of organization. Yes, if your movement is disorganized and has no central leadership and no central kind of drive, it's less likely to succeed, whether it's violent or not. It just is, right? There are so many benefits to having a coherent community coalesce around a single banner, basically, even if it's multiple groups. This can't be understated. and violence, to be clear, is divisive in that way. It will automatically gatekeep who can participate in the protest.
You're not.
Keep people out.
I don't think that that's true, Wick, because from what I've read, it seems like violence offers another alternative way of expressing discontent that isn't available to a lot of people. Like, a lot of people don't have the time or energy to join like a disciplined protest movement, but they might have the time to like get off and like go out onto the streets to riot just on one day.
If you aren't strong, if you aren't able to enact violence, and most people aren't. Let's be clear. Kids, elderly, these people generally can't do violence on the same level that I could. Or
I mean, so long as destruction of property is considered violent, I'm pretty sure each and every one of those can sabotage plenty of things without much effort.
Well, Wick, you seem to have this conception of an effective violent protest. No, hang on. You seem to have this notion of an effective violent protest as being like the 300 Spartans at the front line of a rally in the street. But violent protest incorporates more than just actually going fisticuffs with the cops toe-to-toe, right? So, for example, Gandhi's Satyagraha movement, I can never bloody pronounce that, was itself committed to nonviolence, but it was massively aided by the fact that the Indian National Army was also bombing and assassinating the British during that entire time, making the holding of India seem increasingly unpopular. That aided in the efficacy of Gandhi's movement. Now that
you can point to one-offs where that might be true, but I'm talking in general. We're talking about generality.
No, but the generality is on my side.
Even in general, Erica Chenoweth, who is your primary source, Chenoweth, she recently wrote a paper where she said that violent flanks of the movement have mixed effects. That it isn't just straightforwardly about positive or negative, that there's both positive and negative effects to having a violent but unarmed section, which is what riots are. Riots are violent but unarmed.
So the problem here, again, is when we want a movement to succeed, right, whether it be in an authoritarian regime, such as Balkans or things like that, with the butcher of the Balkans, Milosevic was his name, right? Very violent, very repressive regime there. And then we have democracies such as America, right, back in the 60s and even today. In both cases, what violence does is it keeps people from participating because so many people are just naturally, instinctually, intuitively disinclined to do violence towards the people around them. That's just the natural state. And so when you see people getting, when you come across a person, you have no context, you don't know what's going on, you see one person beating the shit out of the other, most people's instinct are to defend the person who's being beat up. Whether or not the person deserved getting hit, that doesn't come into play. We don't know. We don't see. So when we talk about framing narratives, you're right that there are certain groups out there who will frame anything as violent, no matter how small, how limited, anything like that. But it does us no service to stand in front of a burning building and preach how things are mostly peaceful. That was a gift to the people against your movement. It was a gift to the people who oppose what you want to see. And we can't let that happen. We just have to call balls and strikes. And if things are violent, we condemn it. And when things aren't, we say, no, you're wrong. But people have to trust us. And right now they don't.
And the thing with BLM, though, you were talking about the idea of having to have like very seasoned protesters to make sure that it stays very like well behaved. But like BLM protesters were not like well trained, but they were mostly peaceful. And also, how many videos did we watch of antagonists within BLM protests trying to instigate violence? Even that weird guy with the fucking black over his head who was smashing those windows, and everyone tried to stop him. Like, that's what they mean. But that's what if I say condemning violence within your movement, that's what I mean, right? Like, just you see it, you stop it, and definitely don't like try to adopt it as a strategy unless you're in like fucking South Africa or something, you know, when it's like when everything else has been exhausted.
So wait, that one guy that people tried to stop, should they physically try to stop him?
Maybe, yeah.
So
or just gather around him, film him.
Well, it depends on
Yeah.
the context. If he's like beating up
Depends.
babies, yeah, stop.
If he's
that.
hitting, if he's maybe smashing up windows, just like film him, catch him doing it, try to identify him for the.
So just to be clear,
Wait, you wanna
hang on.
identify protesters?
No, just very quickly. So just to be clear, you guys are entirely in line with protesters engaging in violence, provided it is only targeting people who are identified as other protesters.
That's
But
not
we
true
think
at all.
totally differently about defensive violence versus
that is-
escalating to violence, right?
What it is violence. Like if I forcibly stop somebody from smashing a window, that is violence. You can.
That's it's
well,
a,
yeah, but
yes,
we
but it's a
also
different
would-
scale. There's
if
a.
people start-
Do you not just let me quick? Serious. Do you not understand the difference between someone hitting someone in the face and someone stopping someone from hitting someone? in the
Wait,
face?
can I ask?
Oh no! In
can
this
you-
case,
wait.
it would actually be. Oh, actually, Doe, you can go. You can go.
I was gonna say, can you see the difference between like cars murdering 1 million vertebrates every single day and someone, I don't know, what's a number of things you could do? Sabotaging a car plant, what's
Yes,
the...
blowing up a car plant is more violent than a car existing.
I didn't say
I will bite
sabotaging.
that
Oh, no,
bullet.
I didn't say blowing up. I didn't say blowing
Yeah.
up. I said
Sabotage.
sabotaging. Sabotage is very, very, very. There's a large range of things you can do, but like, yeah. So murdering animals, just like 3,700 people every day, murdering them is less violent than stopping a car company from producing cars.
Just to come back to the question about the guy smashing windows, I think what was the most common thing to respond to that was basically people just let them know that they were on their own, that they didn't represent the movement. It was showed on camera to show the public that this isn't like what we're for, and then the person fucked off and they would just boo them or something. That was like
That's
the most common.
look.
I saw.
That's fair, and I don't think any of us would contend against, for example, a protest maintaining some level of order or standards of conduct within their group. But when we're talking about directing your attention towards condemning protest violence, we're not talking about one or two people, which will exist in every single movement or can be projected to exist in every single movement, regardless of the explicit policy, no matter how carefully it's enforced within the movement. We're talking about other movements that are alongside, looking towards the same ends, that are engaging in different strategies. So, for example, there is one movement that is dogmatically against any kind of physical altercation, even in self-defense. That'd be the MLK strategy. There's another one that's like, well, no, if the cops bash against us, we bash them back, we maintain our bodily integrity, etc., etc. If you direct your resources against that group, you're effectively giving propagandistic fodder to the other group, which can then paint the movement as a whole as intrinsically violent, except for some of the good ones. You see the problem?
So the problem is, at least in the MLK movement, right? If we're going to use the civil, I think that's the one that people go to because they're most familiar with it. But we have data to suggest that even when violence was started by the police and then the people simply fought back, that still ended up being kind of a wash in effectiveness. And people tend to decide with the state. Just that's their bias, right? And we can say that's not fair, that's not just. I agree, but that's generally what happens. And I think most of what we're going to get to here is the other side is saying, well, I can give you a source, right? But it was a study done in very recently, basically, that showed that basically the riots led to the election of the 68 riots specifically.
The civil rights movement isn't a great example simply for the reason that the Civil Rights Act was being tied up for years before Kennedy was assassinated. And then a more savvy politician in Lyndon B. Johnson came in and managed to get it pushed through.
What do you mean it was being tied up?
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
He was in
the same year he was killed, no?
No, not unless I'm very mistaken. I can double check that.
He took it to Congress in 63, right?
He took it to Congress in 63, but the historical record, I believe, is that Lyndon B. Johnson was actually successful in pushing it through, and that it was being tied up by the Democrats at the time. I'd have to get the particulars though, so I'm going to claim the same thing that Wick just did.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way, I think that what we're going to get to here is a difference in what we want the world to be versus what the world is. I would love to live in a world where, yes, people were able to suss out the nuance of violence in an event and understand that not everyone who is being violent is necessarily in the wrong, but that's not the world we actually live in. The world we actually live in, people abhor violence. They want stability more than anything else. And when you threaten that stability, or you appear to threaten that stability, they are going to largely side against you. So what you need to do is to demonstrate that the people you are going against are the ones that are threatening your stability. And the best way to do that, like it or not, is the martyr strategy. It is to have people beat you up, get shown on
Okay,
TV.
so sorry to
That's just what wins.
sorry to cut off this Braveheart speech, but very quickly. So it seems like what actually happened was Kennedy had this referred to the Rules Committee. Lyndon B. Johnson had this brought before the Senate, and that was the key difference here. So Johnson made a different move than Kennedy did, which resulted in the bill actually being pushed into effect as opposed to being held up in debate.
And I think also Lyndon B. Johnson had a massive majority when he ran on civil rights, because by that point, support for civil rights, I think it was like in the 50s, I think 20% of Americans saw it as the biggest issue in America, but then by Lyndon Johnson, it was like more than half because of what they were seeing happening in the South.
So
Because
I
of
want to
all the
really
images of the
quick.
cops. Yeah.
Okay.
Loner Box, really quick. Previously, did you say that in Letter from a Birmingham Jail, Martin Luther King Jr. condemned the riots, the violence?
No, it's not in language of the unheard. He condemns violence in a lot of places. So yeah.
Okay, well, just in the middle, just in the middle of Letter from a Birmingham Jail, he says, in your statement, you assert that our actions, even though peaceful, must be condemned because they precipitate violence. But is this a logical assertion? Isn't this like condemning a robbed man because his possessions of money precipitated the evil act of robbery? Isn't this like condemning Socrates because his unswerving commitment to truth and his philosophical inquiries precipitated the act by the misguided populace in which they made him drink hemlock? Isn't this like condemning Jesus because his unique God consciousness and never ceasing devotion to God's will precipitated the evil act of crucifixion?
I can say, I know that, but you're referring. What actions is he referring to that they're condemning? He's not referring to violence.
Let me read you another quote
violence.
from the Letter from Birmingham Jail. He says, I started thinking about the fact that I stand in the middle of two opposing forces in the community. One is a force of complacency made up of, I'm not going to use that word, who as a result of long years of repression have been so completely self-drained to self-respect and sense of somebodyness. And then the other force is one of bitterness and hatred and comes perilously close to the advocating of violence. It is expressed in the various black nationalist groups that are springing up over the nation, the largest and best known being Elijah Muhammad's Muslim movement. The movement is nourished by the contemporary frustration over the continued existence of racial discrimination. So yes, he does condemn the violence.
This isn't even a debate. Of course, he condemned violence of the protesters. When he's talking about they precipitate violence, he's talking about the strategy, which was to go and get the shit beaten out of you by cops. That's what he's talking about.
Yeah, the disagreement that he has with the moderates are that violence will not.
Wait. Was I wrong about that or what?
No, you're right.
Okay,
I'm
thanks.
not disagreeing with that.
What were you getting at me for then?
I asked I asked and double checked, but I'm
okay, cool.
This bit here, I'm sorry. This bit here is he. I'm sorry. Never mind. Honestly, I don't care about this.
I can clarify. He's talking about precipitating violence in the sense that, yes, they did want the cops to react to them violently, because when they didn't, when they went to Albany, the sheriff there was very strategic. They were very calm with the protesters, and then basically they left with nothing. So when they went to Birmingham, where Bull Connor was a fucking psycho, they knew that getting the cops to attack them would look very good in the press, it would look very good internationally, and it would bring civil rights to the forefront.
Right.
But so it's the violence of the cops.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
If I can suggest a redirection, and this might actually be a more productive conversation as opposed to simply a debate, there seems to be an intrinsic.
Running away from the topic at hand. Okay.
Oh, not actually. I'm actually going directly towards your approach.
Yourself.
The assumption that the opticality to a general public is critical to the success of a social movement sort of presumes that social movement, or the group that constitutes a social movement, for example, if it's a case of an ethnic group asserting its rights against the broader majority, that group has to not be held in contempt in the first place. There is a long history of social movements of oppressed ethnic groups, so on and so forth, that is simply never recorded. This is one of the things I bring up in my opening statement when I talk about there's a bit of a survivorship bias going on here in which we count the successful movement as representative of all of the quote-unquote violent fringes that may themselves have common cause with the mainstream movement, but are actually have their own discrete goals and values and constitution, etc., that are nonetheless sort of disappeared because, well, this movement succeeded, therefore they were just lucky enough to succeed along with them, despite the fact that they chose a losing strategy.
Do you not think even just real quick, even in a because I take issue with the foundation of your statement here.
Really?
So let me simply ask that: do you not think that people's perceptions of a group can be changed? So even if a group is despised, do you not think that over time and with effort, that the public perception of that despised group can be changed in a more positive direction?
Well, the public perception of a group whose overt oppression people are comfortable with, say for the example in a group that has been enslaved for a significant amount of time, that group's perception is not going to be changed by that group more quietly accepting their oppression or being more passive towards it. There's going to be some kind of instigating factor that causes an explosion of attention to it.
Accepting your oppression and then being violent. Civil resistance is resistance.
Oh, I strongly disagree. I strongly disagree.
You are resisting
an active resistance. An active resistance.
Doing it through blowing things up.
Well, no. An active resistance is itself intrinsically violent. And if you are choosing,
come on, no,
yes.
MLK's. Well, then weren't all of MLK's disruptive protests, sit-ins?
Well, I mean, this is Wick's thesis. He was very careful to say that a nonviolent protest does not indicate a peaceful protest, right?
Well, I think Wick would agree with me on this. He's welcome to correct me, but I think Wick would agree with me that these are examples, like MLK's protests. I know that these are easy examples to point to, but these are
they represent a direct challenge. They represent a direct existential challenge to the way of life of Americans at the time.
Yeah, but
well,
the
they were
problem is
loud
that
and disruptive, but not violent.
The problem is that no one defines violence in this way outside of people who are trying to impress their first-year sociology teacher. It's like when you look at fucking if you look at any of the academic literature on this, when they say MLK was non-violent, they're not saying he was like law-abiding, well-behaved. Yeah, he broke the law fucking loads. He deliberately got himself arrested, but they still class him as non-violent, right? When we say violence, I think we mean generally. Most people think destruction of property or physically attacking people. That's what most people mean by violence.
Well, that's sort of immaterial because the literature that's going to give you the information about whether or not non-violent versus violent protest is more effective is not going to be using that late definition. It's going to be referring to whether or not
they do, though.
It's going to be referring to whether or not they were armed, whether or not they targeted, for example, property as opposed to persons. And by the way, some of the literature is very interesting. They have definitions that you would find sort of unintuitive. For example, they assume that media coverage of broken windows will tend towards an understanding of a movement as nonviolent versus attacks on persons, which they will identify as being more violent. But when you actually look at the coverage of the BLM riots and protests that characterized them as violent, the thing they pointed to primarily, with the exception of some cases like the Rittenhouse case, was broken windows, burning cop cars, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. And I think that this highlights the importance of not giving into this kind of framing and de-emphasizing it when it comes up. Like if you are really serious about this, then you don't want to spend your protesting your resources doing all this condemnation. You just want to keep on doing what you were already doing. Another thing I wanted to say to Sunday's point earlier about you not being held in contempt. This is something that receives support in the literature, that the martyrdom strategy that we're talking about of going out and getting yourself beat up, it's not very effective when the audience is not already sympathetic to your cause. Vigilante violence against like Black people in the United States has always been super common, but it didn't garner much sympathy from the primarily white audience until after a certain point, when the audience was paying more attention.
No, this is important. Why were they paying more attention? What changed between 1850, right, or let's say 1900 and 1955? What changed?
It wasn't.
New factor was introduced into society that changed the dynamics here? Because there's an answer to this.
There's a lot of answers to that. That's 50 years, which includes 2 world wars.
I wasn't even talking about that long of a time period. I was talking about like Eisenhower to Lyndon B. Johnson, like that short of a time period.
The main invention in that short of a time period that became much more common and much more widely produced throughout American homes was mass media, the television, things like that. This coincided, right, with the changes in perception, because we didn't just hear about it and things like that, but you saw it. You saw the black kids being hosed down by the cops.
But you've identified, but Wick, you've identified a key weakness in nonviolence as a dogmatic strategy, in that you are relying on the media covering your movement favorably, and not simply only
cover you better.
But
in general, if you were nonviolent, yes.
It's also
but that's untrue though.
I can bridge the gap that you two are having. I'm going to push back on maybe Wick a little bit here, but like there is actually a perfectly good example of when nonviolence can be pursued, and if it is completely ignored by the media and the system, then they kind of leave you with no choice. Mandela was a perfect, like him and the ANC pursued nonviolence for decades, but after they were outlawed and after there was like numerous massacres against nonviolent protesters, and after the fucking there were like forced removals of black communities like in the millions because they were making the cities too black, then they decided that violence was inevitable, so they channeled it. They chose to say, okay, we're going to direct this into sabotage. They went for, they deliberately targeted infrastructure because they wanted to make the country ungovernable under that system.
Yeah.
So put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Hold on. Wait.
But. Yes.
Go ahead, Wick.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that there's never a time for violence. Obviously, that's not true. There is. There are extenuating circumstances, there are edge cases, there are times where you are left with literally no choice. But my argument is that, on the whole, in general, nonviolent civil resistance is more effective and better and leads to better outcomes, because
except
we
when
have
it doesn't.
to also look at what does success look like. When a violent movement, right, is successful, it is less likely to end in democracy. It is less likely to end in non-repressive regimes.
I would like to interject.
This is because
just a moment, if I may.
Sorry.
I just want to interject.
This is bias from the moderator.
It is towards good conversation. So everyone present agrees there are instances where nonviolence as a doctrine is preferable, and times when the opposite is preferable. Obviously, different countries, different situations, different times. Sure. I was curious on a point that got brought up earlier that I felt was under-discussed. You were talking about the degree of permissibility of violence in nonviolent movements. Because when we cite MLK, of course, a principled nonviolent actor, the way he talked about violence, rioting, property destruction, would have been considered by media today, and was then, to be overly permissive and tolerant of the violent elements of the civil rights protest. That is to say, while many in the media look to see uncritical denunciations, he would often qualify, he would categorize, he would explain, oh, well, sure, I think it's bad, however. And for that, he was often blamed for enabling the violence. To what extent do you think a non-violent movement has to condemn inevitable elements of violence that exist alongside them? How much is too far? If MLK had to toe that line in a way that upset people on both sides, I don't think there's an easy answer.
Well, I can give an answer that's actually affirmative on Wick's side. So, for example, if somebody on your side is proposing to do something horrifically violent, like to the point where we would consider this to be unpalatable, say, for example, the kidnapping and torturing of the children of whoever in order to provoke some kind of positive political response. I think under certain conditions there is a moral threshold where you would actually decide, no, like the cost becomes too high, or regardless of whether or not on balance some onlooker might like consider these to be even, you would not partake. And I think that everybody on my side would probably agree with that.
The question is, I thought, isn't whether you partake or not, it's when it happens. So when it inevitably happens, because again,
no, you would condemn. You would condemn and you would go against.
Right?
You would condemn and you would go against, probably in as strong terms as you would say, Wick. Because once again, like the threshold here for why violence is considered why violence must be left on the table is because there may be a threshold beyond which violence is necessary. Because maybe, for example, media coverage at all is simply impossible. Maybe positive media coverage is impossible. Maybe the media is slanted in such a way as even if you have a nonviolent protest, it simply is intractable regardless. Maybe your community is so small, a nonviolent protest simply means you're invisible. Or maybe there are forces that override democratic ones that are, for example, running over your land with pipelines and bulldozers, so on and so forth. That media coverage, even despite being entirely positive, maybe there's an entire media empire sort of built around condemning that kind of thing. Nonetheless, it's inefficacious in actually stopping it. Maybe under those cases, you actually have to engage in violence to physically stop the progress of that machinery, and so on and so forth.
And also, to a point that we had earlier about the martyrdom strategy, why is it that police respond violently to peaceful protesters when it happens? I think
the smart ones don't.
Well, the smart ones
don't. The smart ones
but
don't because they know it's going to make them look shitty.
But
do you
what
conditions? Do you think the cops look good nowadays? Like, do you think
I'm
people
not
are
saying
generally...
that? Wait. Let me finish. What I'm saying is that in order for there to be a disproportionate police response, there needs to be a reputation or thought that these protesters are violent, that they are going to cause mayhem in the streets. This is the kind of thing that will prompt a disproportionate reactionary response from the police. If the police don't, if the police know that the protesters are not going to do anything, then what are they going to do? They're just going to handle them with kid gloves, and then the protesters are going to gain nothing. This martyrdom strategy then relies on the existence of violent flanks, because violent flanks are what make the possibility of they create the possibility of the disproportionate police response that you want.
Are you arguing that
I don't know if that's necessarily
we're not
true.
violent enough that the police will actually treat us better? That'd be a terrible world where the police treat the protesters well. What a horrific outcome! Where police are treating protesters with kid gloves. What a horrific dystopian outcome!
Your whole point was that the martyrdom strategy is the best way of getting social movements towards their objectives, right? So if you're serious about that, if you are serious about the martyrdom strategy, then you will be relying on the violence of certain fringe flanks in order to change your reputation.
I would like to hear. I heard just a moment after you're done speaking. I'd like to hear from Professor Meat and from Doe as well. They both spoke up and have spoken less. But go ahead.
I'll be concise as possible. Martyrdom is one effective strategy. There are many others. When it comes to talk about civil resistance, there are very historically effective ways. There are protests in the streets that we think of mostly, but there's also stayaways. There's slowdowns. There's all sorts of
yes, but if I may very quickly before if I can interfere just very quickly before we proceed to the two, and I'll be quiet. The problem of the WIC is that the protests in the streets that you're referring to, they are either going to be passive when they encounter police, or they are not going to be. If the police, for example, simply do not engage in violence against the protesters, your martyrdom strategy fails because there's no active martyrdom.
Okay.
That's not true.
No, please. Professor Meat, please go right ahead. You open your.
I'm sorry, guys. I'll be real quick, and then you guys can go all you want. I'm just here to back up my buddy Wick. But no, I appreciate it. The only thing I was going to say is that I was going to point out is that the point of the martyrdom strategy, the reason the martyrdom strategy works, and part of why I don't think it's sort of a mischaracterization to say the martyrdom is like creating victims, not realistically in my mind, because the point of martyrdom ideally is to put on display malpractices, injustices that are happening on a daily basis, right? You're like in the case of ML in the civil rights movement, these are people, at least ideally, theoretically, who are like in a population who is going to be doled out injustice to them, who are electing to be the ones who it is done to so that it can be seen, right? And so that specific brand of martyrdom, you're right, isn't always possible. You can't always rely on the cops beating you up, but that's not the only way to put on display the negative circumstances that you're trying to protest against.
And
I've
likewise,
seen some other ways. Sorry, I've seen some other ways. Like some people do die-ins. If you've ever seen a die-in before, where they pretend to die on the floor. Most of the time, I've seen people talk about those. They laugh about them because they say like, "Oh, you guys are pretending like you have something that's so bad that's happening to you, but really you're fine because look, you're still alive. Things are still okay." Like that's.
Yeah,
that's part of that.
Like
So
this poses a problem for.
I just want to defend my. No, I want to defend my. I guess it's Just Up Oil, right? Because again, like, yeah, the cops are pretty well behaved with them most of the time, but they get a lot of attention, even if they just do a die-in. And what usually happens is it's not so much about making the protesters look good. It's because again, civil rights protesters were not favored by the American public, but the legislation was favored. Same with Just Up Oil, because usually you'll get the default response from the average person to Just Up Oil is, "Oh, I hate those hippies, but also climate change is actually a big deal." Shit.
Yeah, but the thing is that Just Stop Oil supplements the sillier things that it does with like really extreme things. Like I think recently, a couple protesters went to jail for multiple years, or got sentenced to go to jail for multiple years because they got up on top of a bridge and stopped traffic across it for hours. Like,
They were acquitted of that, I believe.
Sorry, they were acquitted.
If it's the case I'm thinking of, they were. Well, there was recently a case where they were put on trial to go to jail for possible years for obstructing traffic, but they were acquitted.
It
might be a different one.
It's kind of immaterial. Good for them, but nonetheless, yeah.
The point is that they do both, right? They do more extreme things than just the
But that's not
die-ins,
violence,
right?
Blocking traffic is
Yeah,
violence.
that would typically
Blocking
be seen as,
traffic.
like,
Hang on.
disobedience.
We'll slow down. Blocking traffic is very easily and often is construed as violence. Blocking traffic prevents people from getting food, from getting to the hospital. People die when traffic is blocked. That's not a laughing matter. That's the artery of society.
So if I block, hold on. Here's the thing. I would say that, for example, anti-abortion protesters trying to block access to abortion clinics for when people are trying to get in. I would say that that's violent protest because you are trying to obstruct somebody, specifically the person trying to get an abortion, from getting something that is like that they medically want, right? Do you not think of that as violent in any way?
The problem is if you define violence that broadly, then everything becomes violence. Like consuming almond milk is violence. Have you seen those supply chains? They're pretty fucking uneven and like coercive. So yeah, but the problem when it comes to at least, sorry?
I said, why dismiss that?
Because the good thing about language is that like we all
No. The good thing about language, Loner Box. No. The good thing about language, Loner Box, is that we can take. Hang on. The good thing about language, Loner Box, is that we can take an expanded category and then we can particularize it. So we can say yes, in fact, violence takes place with a myriad of different types of activities that aren't equivalent to the physical breaking of another human being's skin, and then we can particularize corporeal violence, physical violence against bodies, violence against property, etc., etc. This doesn't present a problem.
It's making it harder to communicate.
What about this wasn't clear?
When I want
because
it to
then
be
that
very
means
clear.
that means
When I go
MLK
to
was
someone
violent, right?
and I
But
say,
when you
hey,
but when you
I've had
explain
violence
but when you
been
have to
against me, I need them to
but when
understand
you
what I mean. I
but
don't
when
need
you
them to
yes but when
well,
but when you say when you say a but when you say
cut
but
you
when you
off.
say but when you say a protest is violent, you and somebody asks how so, you will have to explain in what manner they were violent, and what you will say is, did they murder a person? Hang on. Did they murder? Hang on. Did they murder a person? No, they broke a window. Well, hang on. I thought violence was just harm against persons. Yeah, well, the property is an extension of the person. It's their livelihood, etc., etc. You're playing the exact same game.
That's
no,
not true
but
at all.
like when you look at the majority of the literature, like violence is either destruction of property or attacking people. That's it. Like you can.
But that involves that exact same level of abstraction, Lonerbox.
But then the problem is we've just been having a whole discussion about whether MLK was non-violent, and you know, people.
But you're making the same conceptual move.
Violence. But is boycotting bus services not violent because they bankrupted businesses? Yeah, you could say that, but then we can't communicate. Then we're just grunting at each other.
As somebody said at the
I don't
beginning,
think that's true at all.
I also have no problem with. I also have no problem with biting that bullet. I have no problem with characterizing that as violent. That costs me nothing. That serves my side just fine.
Oh my god. Yes, it is a problem.
It doesn't.
If I could interject briefly,
please.
The moment you step away from anything done against another human body as violence, and towards property damage also constitutes violence, you open up a gradient. Blocking traffic can impede people from accessing vital services. Striking as a worker can disrupt supply lines that people rely on to live. I don't know if there's an objective answer to where exactly, like the word violence, capital V violence. But to avoid the semantic discussion, I think unless you disagree, I think we can acknowledge the ambiguity of the gradient, and we can just specify what kind of violence we're referring to. Better that than back and forthing over whether or not this or that or the other.
My definition, and we can agree on this or not. You can, if we want to argue about this, we can. But my definition: physical to other people, breaking of skin violence, or direct property damage, like direct, not
okay.
indirect.
But that or property damage though introduces exactly the same gradient that me.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. Hang on.
All the way
Calm down, Wick. Calm down, Wick.
We're doing it again.
Me, Doe, and Sirius are perfectly fine with accepting that there is a gradient of violence that includes these other things, and that violence can have different levels of severity depending on your perspective and depending on your values, etc., etc. There's no contradiction there whatsoever. However, when you're introducing an abstraction that is personal property that is perhaps very distant from the person, maybe some personal property of the wealthy, for example, may be so infinitesimal, even though so large compared to the average person, that its destruction doesn't even register to them until long after the event. They simply don't care. And yet, nonetheless, it can be used adequately to characterize a protest as violent or non-violent, depending on like whether or not there's a picture of a smashed window that can be put on the news. Right? Like a bank losing its window does not hurt the bank in any meaningful capacity. And yet, nonetheless, that can be used to characterize a protest movement carried out by a people who are actively being choked out from having access to essential services.
Well, that's because people are going to categorize that violence in the same way that Wick is categorizing it.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to see the broken window and they're going to say that's direct violence.
Okay, so then isn't the problem then that we're just ceding the framing to the other side? Like, that seems to be a huge part of the problem here, is that we're just ceding that it's violence.
Well, you can say that framing. Well, you can. The word doesn't matter. The point is that that's what people care about. That thing.
Well, no,
we can call it something. We can call it something other than violence. We call it flubgub for all I care. The point is that there's this thing that Wick was called.
That's not true. Hold on, that's not true. Professor Meat, it's just not true that the word doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
Serious. The problem is that you guys are trying to go against a fucking like ages-long tradition of when we talk about the difference between non-violence and violence and protest, we typically mean violence being destruction of property and attacking people, and non-violence being like civil disobedience.
Well, I mean, by ages long, you don't actually mean by ages long. You don't actually mean that long. We haven't particularized it that long ago.
Because
you're just kind of stating that. That's not.
We're also moving away from it in the literature. Like in the literature, they're moving away from violence versus non-violence precisely because it's so subjective and fuzzy. Like,
and it's a mistake. They're doing it, and that's a mistake.
No, but hang on. No, just an obvious counter to what Lonerbox is saying that demonstrates it's not true is that in political science since Weber, we've been characterizing the state's legitimacy as being by dint of its legitimate monopoly on physical violence. However, at no point is it required that the state be actively engaging in violent corporeal action against human bodies at any single moment for it to have that legitimacy. We understand violence as, for example, existing in potentia. We do not talk about violence as involving simply the destruction of human bodies and or property. That's inaccurate.
This is a problem, if I may, just real quick, without
interrupting. No. If you're going to make a claim, if you're going to make an appeal to the traditional use of the term, you have to actually appeal to a source. But I'm not seeing one.
Quick, can I respond to what Sunday said? When I say in the literature, I mean specifically in discussions about political violence versus non-violence. Obviously,
but that's literally what I'm referring to. Like the father of sociology saying this.
I mean like contemporary literature when it discusses violence and non-violence. That's
contemporary literature is what we are referring to. Contemporary literature is what we are referring to when we say that it does not refer specifically to corporeal violence against skin and buildings.
So when when all these papers talk about like MLK and non-violence, even though he did things that literally
colloquially in newspapers, peaceful protest,
and in the literature on violence and non-violence.
Again,
that's incorrect. You're actually just incorrect. I'm sorry.
So here's the thing.
If you're reading fucking Foucault, everything's violent.
No, we're actually reading the same sources as Wick.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the issue. When you want to communicate to someone, like what's going on, and you tell the average
What's Foucault's position on violence, Lonerbox?
Average
How does Foucault define violence?
Foucault is one person.
I
I
hate
try to
Foucault.
talk to everyone.
You've never
I try
read
to talk
Foucault.
to as many people as possible. And the vast majority of people out there, and I will die on this hill, if you say, hey,
You
my
will.
movement is violent, they think of two things. They think of breaking windows, and they think of, breaking windows, breaking
Well, clearly
cars,
not. Half the
they
debate
think
panel
of-
does not agree with that.
I'm good at
I'm an
telling you,
average
yeah,
Joe. I'm not in an ivory tower somewhere, dude.
To Wick's point and to what you said earlier, Sirius, like, the reason I say the word doesn't matter is because if all of a sudden you called breaking people's windows something other than violent and you put it on the news, the fact that it was not being called violence is not what is determining whether or not people like
That's
it or
actually
disapprove it or
that's
approve it.
completely untrue. That's the thing. Like, we have done experiments on this where the exact same events are framed as either violent or non-violent, and people's perception of the legitimacy of the protesters changes.
I am sure that if you frame something as violent versus non-violent, framing it as violent is going to.
But that's what you're appealing to when you're saying that the optics are what matters.
What I'm saying is the quality that Wick is referring to. What I'm trying
Is
to say
optical.
is that even
the words that
it's
you
not
use
purely
influence
optical. It's not purely optical. Even in those scenarios, the bulk of the things that people are going to decide on whether or not they approve of it or disapprove of it is going to be the invocation of the underlying qualia. Right? People care about
Underlying
violence. Actually, we can
qualia.
call it.
What's the underlying qualia? What are you talking
The
about?
characteristics of the definition.
That's not
That's not what qualia means. I have no idea what you're saying.
Sure. Do you really have no idea what I'm saying when I say the characteristics of the definition?
Yes, I have no idea what you're saying.
Punching someone in the face and
You don't know what the sentence characteristics of the
Yeah, I can tell you. I can actually tell you.
Wait, hold on, because we ended up doing it anyway. I think the problem here is that the selective framing of certain actions as violent or not, and the subjectivity of that determination has literally been a tool of social control for as long as we've had mass media. So appealing to or even attempting to work out where exactly something falls in this line that is deliberately kept arbitrary to reaffirm the values of whoever gets to determine whether or not it is seems really counterproductive. We're obviously talking about a distinction between violence and social violence. There are plenty of theorists who speak on these issues who would happily side on either side of this issue, and we can also agree, I think, that whether or not something optically plays well and whether or not it's academically sound are two entirely separate questions. I'd be far more interested if we specifically referred to what kinds of violence or not we're talking about when we talk about what is justified, whether we're talking about breaking windows directly, strike action, deploying supply lines, whatever we mean. Because I think we could do this particular bit forever.
Well, violent protest can involve, for example, the destruction of government property, attempting to bulldoze a traditional native site.
I just want the specific acts being referred to over what could otherwise be an interminable discussion.
When I think about
it's going to depend. It's just all going to depend on the context of the specific social movement. Like, there is no one size fits all for every social movement.
Can we make one for this discussion, though? Can we make a one size fits all?
What?
For
No.
this discussion?
Why would we? Because it changes. It changes based on time too.
Because
so,
what's going to happen is you're going to change it based on what it fits your argument.
Here's
that's what's going to happen.
No, that's not what.
Here's
a question for you. Here's a question for the panel.
Here's the thing.
No, hang on. I've got an interesting moderator.
What's going to happen.
I've got an interesting question for the panel. I am curious about people's take on this. So I think we would generally agree that that there's a rising tide of transphobia in this country, as well as generally anti-feminist sentiment, etc., etc. Can anyone tell me in which province there was a stabbing of a feminist professor in the last month? No.
I read the article, but I don't remember the province.
In Canada?
Same here.
Yeah.
In Canada, yes.
Yeah, I think I
and how much did that cut?
Canada,
how much wind did that take out of the sails of conservative reactants against trans issues? None.
What's your point?
That is my point. It had no effect.
So again, isolated incident.
If the targeted community, if the targeted unless the targeted community is not held in contempt, it lacks the capacity to change minds by passively accepting its oppression.
Yeah, but that's because it's such a singular.
You gotta have better evidence.
Well, that is kind of true. Like even like at the time it happened, Emmett Till didn't get that much attention at all. But then 10 years later, everyone's paying attention. But
yeah,
I love you, Lauren.
I could say if we're talking about feminist professors, I mean, I think.
But if we're also if we're also talking about like how much did January 6th damage the Republican Party? They've been fighting each other ever since on that. So,
well, although to be clear,
depends.
As far as violent protests are concerned, very few deaths, very little property damage.
Yeah, but it was still everyone here. I hope would consider that violent.
Wait, why?
But
Why-
hang on. Wait. What
It was
if?
attacking property? It was
No.
violent.
But
They
slow
hit
down.
people.
What if?
They gave
What
cops
if?
PTSD and someone died?
Yeah, absolutely. But what if that didn't happen? What if they just walked in? Maybe someone shat on a desk. What then? Would that not be violent still? I would consider that violent. That's a direct affront to the freedom of the entire country.
As violence by the public.
Breaking into a building is probably violence. Yeah.
Well, no, I disagree with you,
Hold on.
Letterbox. I think if they were peaceful, if
Or
they had
like the
simply
vandalism,
come in
yeah.
Breaking
and not
into- wait.
vandalize,
No,
not
let
hurt
him cook.
anyone, it wouldn't. No, if I'm telling you right now, if they had come in, they had not vandalized anything, they had not hurt anyone, and they were simply peaceful, that would be looked on much differently. Are you kidding me? That would be looked on much differently
more
by the
favorably.
public than it is now.
I don't know
It's
about
sort of
that.
silly, but it would be way more favorable than what they did.
Yeah, are you arguing against that? Do you disagree?
I mean, I didn't know about the cops being killed until long after. I knew about the person who was climbing the walls being
That's 'cause
shot.
you weren't paying attention. That was like day of.
I was watching it live day of. There was no coverage of that.
Well, sure, but that doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't change the fact that Wick's example, like the example of someone going in and taking a shit, would be viewed way less, would have way less of a disruptive effect on the Republican Party.
Yeah, I don't understand this point that you're
Republican
trying to
Party.
make. Obviously, if January 6th was less violent, it would have been viewed more favorably.
No, you're missing the point. There's survivorship
Straight up.
bias here in terms of what you consider to be a successful protest. You are identifying the ones that people cared about, and therefore they're accepting their oppression and being covered by the media in such a manner as their oppression actually became existent to the people observing it who weren't part of that protest. That depends on so many different things that most people in the world do not have.
Also,
Sure, I would
just to
I'll
say-
just- I'll just agree to that most movements don't succeed. Yeah, I'll agree to
Okay,
that.
but if
that's
most
regardless of
movements
violence or
don't
not.
succeed, if most
That's
movements don't succeed,
regardless of violence or
if
not,
most movements don't
movements
succeed, and what percentage do you suppose those movements are violent? Like we
So
have a
in
handful of
successful movements
cases
by Erica
to draw.
Chenoweth, we have data on this, and you could you dispute the data if you'd like, but we have data from Erica Chenoweth, and you
Your author
You should know the
disputes the
sources.
data.
The non-violent.
Yes, your
is
author
more
disputes the data.
affected.
Your author
Hey.
disputes the data you are citing. Go on, Sirius.
Wick, I wanna point your attention to Erica Chenoweth, like her own characterization of her data. Like she has put out tables showing the difference over time between the violence, the success rates of violent versus non-violent protests. And if we see it changed over time, not after World War II even. So the 1940
It
to
did,
19
though, after World War II. It
Okay.
steadily, non-violence became more and more and more effective.
Yeah, but for those first few decades after World War II, or rather these first couple decades, violent was more effective. So it's not to say that non-violent is never effective. It's that it depends on the time and place and the conditions that you're in. Moreover, I want to point you to something else, which is that Erica's data has been analyzed by other people, which that's good because her data set is huge and extensive, and I applaud her for that. But one thing is that when it was broken down by race, like the racial makeup of the protests, there was no strategic advantage to nonviolence when it was a movement by a minority or disadvantaged population. Violent protests and non-violent protests had the same success rate for minority groups.
So even in the worst case scenario where a group is despised, non-violence or violence has no appreciable benefit towards non-violence, is what you're saying to me right now.
Except in the most famous cases, it actually does and is co-constitutive
In the
of
most
the positive
famous
effects.
cases, what does that even mean?
Well, Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha movement in particular, the decision, the success of that movement was also predicated on its contrary, which was the attack on British officers by the Indian National Army. Yeah. what you're probably
So,
putting your finger on is that
in
in
a
a situation, what you're probably putting your finger on, Wick, and I think we would agree on this, in a situation in which you have the capacity for positive media coverage, in which you are at some level of closeness with the powers that be, you are part of, for example, you are immediate subjects of the city in which those authorities reside, and so on and so forth. Nonviolent action has a greater effect when you have that type of relationship with the given authorities. But when we're talking about there are a myriad of other cases in which that isn't the case, in which nonviolent action
Do you think
simply means...
Let me answer this real quick.
I'm close
because
to
you're
what?
Close, right? Because one of the goals of a civil resistance movement is to ingratiate themselves with the populace, to ingratiate themselves with the pillars of power, which support any kind of structure which they're trying to change.
Oh, that's not true. To ingratiate themselves, that's not true at all. That's very incorrect.
What are you talking about?
What are they protesting against?
They may not want to ingratiate themselves. For
They
example,
want to make the people, because pillars of power that support a regime, an institution, a country, a society, all of them are run by people.
Did we want to ingratiate ourselves?
Yeah,
to the
but
British
slaveholders
when
are
we were
people
separating from
too,
them?
Wick.
What are you talking about? We went to war with slave. They ingratiated themselves with the North, and we went to war and we
Yeah, that's
killed
not a
them.
protest. That's war. That's
Yeah, we killed them. We killed the slave owners, or we tried to.
But you still had whites-only institutions and places.
Sure, it took a while because 400, like at the
But
time,
who are they
hundreds
ingratiating
of years
themselves
of
towards?
protest.
I don't follow you here exactly.
So it's important.
No, but at some point,
Let me
the
explain
motive
it. If you
was
let me
not
explain it,
ingratiation.
maybe you would understand, but you gotta let me finish. So what happens is, what you want to do is, let's take the 1978 Iran revolution, which was nonviolent. It's not often seen.
Oh,
It
that's
was
incorrect,
absolutely
my friend.
nonviolent.
That is very incorrect, my friend.
Okay, how many did they kill? The Iranian protesters.
The Iranian protesters.
How many did they kill? Yeah, how many?
I don't know.
I thought we also
None.
said destruction
They didn't
of
kill
property.
anyone.
Yeah.
They didn't kill anyone because it was non-violent. You absolute moron. Okay, so let me educate you here a little.
I thought
bit.
we said
the reason that,
that-
worked.
I thought we said that
do we not?
property
I gotta answer. I
destruction
gotta
also
talk about
counted
it.
as
So the reason
violent.
this reason this works, right, is because the oil producers, the oil workers.
Are you talking about
did
Mossadegh?
what was called a slow.
Hang on, sorry.
Okay.
Refresh me.
Most
Which
of 50s.
50s,
Yeah, that's
thank
Talking
you.
about the
Different
revolution in the
thing.
70s.
Different
Okay, he did say the revolution. Sorry, I wanted to make sure. I didn't know
70.
if he said revolution or after that.
78.
Because
78.
Mossadegh, I would kind of get where he's coming from, but there were other problems with that. If he's talking about the Iranian Revolution of 1979, no, they fucking wasn't bloodless. Are you insane?
What are you talking about? So again, the reason that it worked, well, it wasn't bloodless because the authorities at the time killed the protesters, and they would have a funeral and protest.
Between
So, yeah,
1963 and
they did
1979, he estimated 3,164 in the anti-Shah movement were killed. The Foundation of Martyrs identified 744 dead in Tehran, where the majority of the casualties were supposed to have occurred. The coroner's office counted 895 dead, and Tehran's main cemetery.
Okay,
they were
3,000
going
in
against
how
like a
many years?
Gestapo
How
type
many years?
secret police. This was not a
When we
bloodless
talk
revolution.
about when we talk about non-violent, I think he means the actions of the protesters,
the
not against the
protesters. I don't
state
care
they're
about the
protesting
state.
against,
The state
right?
is
Yeah.
going to. So even in the.
Yeah,
even-
they didn't have a dogmatic attitude towards violence that,
Oh my
that kept
God.
it off the table. I don't think you're
Who-
correct
They
there.
did though. Okay.
Whose
so the
whose
reason it
definition
worked-
are you using of nonviolence? Are you still using Erica's? Because
Just be specific. Be careful here.
Well, because in Erica Chenoweth's book, like, you can read her footnotes, and specifically she says that the violence versus nonviolence distinction for that book is about whether or not there was an armed subset, or whether or not they were predominantly armed. So that doesn't line up with the colloquial definition that we're using, right?
Well, I'm just
Again,
for
what
whatever
does
it's
this
worth.
have to do with my point?
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, I'm going through like
What it has to
I've
do with
read,
the
like,
point is that-
hold on. This is directly relevant to what. Just a quick clarification to make. Like, it could be the case that there was some violence from the revolutionaries going on at some level, but this is a little bit like I'm going through like it's paper after paper after page after page of people like overwhelmingly unanimously by historians, it seems to be the case that the Iranian Revolution that we're referencing was considered overwhelmingly peaceful. I'm reading articles about how one of the primary tactics that the people used was to go out and confront the soldiers and like literally speak to them and try to get them to come to their side. And it was at one point it was like over 1,000 people per day were defecting from the military police. It's like
they were ingratiating themselves into the pillars of power, and it was fucking successful. And this rewriting of history that we're trying to do, right, is just wild to me. When we have this documented, it's recorded. We can go and we can look at it. What broke the people is when the police who were the security forces were pulling people out of their homes to go work in the oil factory or the oil refinery or whatever it was called. They stopped doing that. They refused to obey. That is the purpose of getting people, of ingratiating yourselves into these pillars of power, is so that the pillars of power who would otherwise support the regime or the country or the institution stop doing so, not necessarily by defecting, though that would be great, but by simply not obeying, not complying, being non-compliant. That is the purpose. That's what works. That's what happens. I don't understand why you were fighting me on this.
Well, because it's not the strategy of every single protest movement. I think
of course it's not the strategy of. I'm saying when they do use this,
we're talking about strategy, it is
more likely to be successful when they don't.
So, but okay, that's not always true though, because what if
it's
your
not always true, but it generally is true.
Wick, are you going to let me speak? Is that these things are conditional on specific circumstances, and I think one instructive case is the South Sudanese separatist or independence movement, because when you look at that kind of
the seizure of the American embassy by Islamic militants in November 1979, the consequent hostage crisis, and above all, the Iranian-Iraq war began in September 1980, strengthened the Islamic Republic because of the rally around flag syndrome. This was not a non-violent protest, Wick. You were incorrect on this.
We're talking about
primarily. This is fundamentally different.
It's about being predominantly
Sunday. You interrupt.
You're sort of. I think Sunday. You're sort of doing the same thing that people do about BLM protests. Where they say, BLM. Where they say, oh well, they point to violent things that did happen and they try to characterize.
Well, that's because the violent things were done by the movement.
No, I love it that we fought so hard against the right wing. It's been like, mostly peaceful. Look at all these riots, and we're like, no, it's mostly peaceful. But now when it comes to the other side, it's like, oh, actually, like this mostly peaceful movement was really.
I wouldn't say that they are mostly peaceful. I wouldn't say. Well, hang on. I wouldn't say.
That's the thing. We don't want to concede the. You guys want to concede the. Oh, sorry.
I wouldn't characterize BLM as non-violent. I would characterize BLM as being besmirched in the sense of being characterized as sort of barbaric and sort of wantonly violent against persons in the street. But I wouldn't characterize them as non-violent. They are intrinsically violent.
Would you characterize it as predominantly violent?
What did I just say, Professor Meat?
I'm asking to clarify.
I was literally just saying it's intrinsically violent.
Oh, what?
Okay. Well, the reason I asked the clarifying question is because I don't think any reasonable person believes that, except maybe some far-right Republicans. No one's
no.
Chat cheering you on. Rob Nora's like, yes, Queen, yes.
No, because violence encompasses. Well, no,
He's in here
no.
cheering you on right now.
I'm sorry. Are you going? Hang on. Wait. Wick.
All right.
Wick. No. Hang on 1 sec, Vaush. I'm so sorry. Wick, you yourself would characterize violence against property as being violence. Destruction of property is violence. Yes. Or would you deny that BLM riots involve violence against property?
Even under that characterization, I would consider.
No. The destruction of property is inherently violent. We are in agreement on this. Everyone here is in agreement on this.
They didn't destroy. They didn't blow shit up. They didn't burn.
BLM. What are you talking about? That was the entire. That was the basis of Rittenhouse. That was the basis of Rittenhouse even being in Kenosha. He was defending proproperty because property was being destroyed. What are you smoking?
No one's saying riots didn't happen.
Wait, sorry. No, we all agree on this. BLM protests were mostly peaceful. Some of them were riots, right? We all agree.
Absolutely.
But you could say that about literally every single movement. It's all. I'm sorry. I interrupted the moderator. My apologies.
Okay, but when they dominated the media, right? Not when
they
were at their most prominent, but when the media started to focus on them and characterize them as violent. No,
I mean it does. Like when a riot happens, people are going to cover it. Of course, even if you're even CNN. Remember, CNN got they looked so stupid with this reporter saying mostly peaceful protest with a burning building behind them. Like media is going to do that. It's a riot. Of course, people want to see a riot on TV.
Yeah. So and then what happens when the media invites you on to talk about your movement, right? In the wake of a riot, do you go up there and you're like, oh well, these people, these are the bad ones, like I hate them, like we need to make a concerted effort to not have so many violent protests, like
as Vaush referenced, as the moderator referenced earlier, MLK gave us a very good playbook for this. He condemned the riots, but also condemned the underlying conditions which caused the riots. He used this as an opportunity not only to distance himself from the violence, but also to reiterate into his audience the conditions which he was protesting.
How much ink did he give to one versus the other?
What do you mean? How much ink did
he spent quite a lot of time?
Books that were primarily
proportionally.
Regardless of ink, he spent so many man hours. Like this was like one of the most fundamental parts of like. I don't want maybe training is the wrong word, but the type of discipline he
okay, no. I'm not talking about training. I'm talking about when he was like making speeches to people.
Yeah,
sure.
You even see that speech that he gave. You can even see because the philosophy of nonviolence was like essential to him, and it's like you can even see the speech where he said like if every black man in America or every black person in America came out in favor of violence, I would stand against them and say this is wrong. Yeah, he was pretty passionate in that direction. But again, I don't think I disagree with you. He said, yeah, we condemn the violence. That's not what we're about. Back to civil rights issues. Is that?
But wait,
serious. Do you disagree with any of that as a strategy?
With what as a strategy? With saying
you seem to be, you've done it like 3 times now. It's like you seem to be very like you don't seem very sure about how to respond. Like if you're on TV asked to condemn the riots or whatever. But it seems like it's pretty simple to just be we condemn the riots. We don't stand for that.
I condemn the riots, and then well, yeah. But that's the thing is that I don't think that. I don't mind doing something like that strategically. What I mind is that is like this incessant focus on it. If you're going to like give a quick condemnation of the riots, whether strategically or because you really believe that the riots are bad, then you should do it.
Well, you should be, if I may, you should be very particular, right? So, for example, if you're going on TV and you say, I condemn the riots, and you are not aware that the media has portrayed the protests categorically as riots, well, then that is being used to condemn the peaceful protests as well. You have to be very particular. You have to say, I am unaware, for example, of people doing X, Y, and Z, throwing grenades into squads of cops or whatever, and I condemn that, of course. Most of us aren't doing that. That's one thing. And of course, like, there's nothing wrong with if being asked, like, are you in favor of your movement eating babies? Of saying, we don't do that, but of course I am, obviously. But when you're talking about, like, do you condemn the riots, quote unquote, and the movement as a whole is being characterized as riots, and adjacent movements are being looped in as riots, of course you would be foolish to do that.
I also don't know what you mean by it being this like incessant attacks on riots and like nothing. I don't know exactly who's doing that. I mean, maybe I could even flip it the other way. It seems to be the case that when BLM was happening, the response on Twitter was like mostly people saying, "No, it's mostly peaceful. Fuck you." But yeah, there are some people
we all agree.
Rioting.
But Loner Box, hang on, Loner Box. We all agree that BLM is overall majority like a peaceful, quote unquote. We can talk about the ambiguities about that later. Protest. No, but we all agree
that it was inherently violent.
Yes, because I don't treat violence and nonviolence and peaceful as synonymous. Just like you, I'm actually the only reason why I'm allowing this is because I'm basing this off of what you said in your opening statement, Wick. We all agree, though, the vast majority of people in BLM protests are not, for example, breaking windows or throwing rocks at cops, etc., etc. And yet, nonetheless, when you look at the news coverage of these protests, what is overwhelmingly shown are burning cop cars and broken windows and dark, like cities at night with the glow of fire in the air. Like, they absolutely characterize these things as riots.
But the problem wasn't showcasing that. The problem was, and I think the reason to answer Sirius is
you don't think the problem was exaggerating that to the point where
isn't that a reason to be less violent?
You'll find out what I think the problem is in a moment here, if you let me. Right? Is that as the reason why it sometimes seems as if we're constantly harping on it, because every time we said we want to try, hey, we condemn the riots, we condemn the violence, let's talk about the issues, someone out there raises their hand and says, actually, I think the riots are base and we should do more of them. And then we have to deal with that chucklefuck, right? And that's a problem.
I mean, you have to deal with them.
I will also say,
you don't have to acknowledge them.
Sorry.
You can just keep talking.
When they exist, they will cause
again, I think it's probably good that when you have the opportunity to stand against rioting within your movement or like excessive force and all that, like, yeah, you probably should do it. I don't know what's wrong with that. And actually, one of the big reasons the protests were mostly peaceful was that they did that. When people tried to antagonize and tried to be more provocative and try to smash shit up, the protesters were they were so mean to them. Like they made sure that that's just what they didn't stand for that. And I think that's a good thing to do. Again, like that's a specific thing. Do you disagree with that, Sirius?
No, I don't disagree with having discipline in a given protest action, but that's the problem I'm having is that violent protests, when they happen, don't tend to happen as the result of like this planned organized effort. They tend to be spontaneous. They tend to be unplanned. They tend to be organic. Like these kinds of things will happen. And so it's one thing to say when you are in a movement circle and you are planning to have a protest that you want to instill a certain kind of discipline into your protesters. That's one thing. It's another thing to like go out of your way to like respond to what right-wingers say about your protest movement when the more violent flanks do their thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think we disagree then, right?
Well,
not really.
How not?
On that particular point, it doesn't seem to be.
I have a question, if I may. So, obviously, if we're talking about the optics and effectiveness of different types of protests, over here in America, most of our protests are nonviolent. Whereas if you're in, like, I don't know, Syria, the only way to protest getting a pothole in your street fixed is by forming a militia and firing rockets at buildings. There's contextual determinations. The question I have is, where's the line? Or to put it another way, if you saw a protest starting peaceful and then it started to tip into violence, how far gone would things have to be for you to look at that and go, okay? Because it's easy to do that in retrospect, right? I mean, there are lots of protests that we get to look back on for lessons to learn, but we don't learn the important lesson, which was what should we have thought at the time? In America, at the time of the civil rights protests, after all, the average person thought that the civil rights protests were a violent movement, that they were disruptive and disorderly. If we'd been listening to Optics Frogs back then, ones we would now disagree with in hindsight, we might have had a different answer. How do you judge? When is it okay to take a movement in that direction? Since we all agree there is a point, I just want to know where it is for you all.
So are
I
you
think
asking,
it's when there's
for clarification, just so I know what you're asking, are you asking when we think it's morally justified that people get violent, or are you asking when we see something get violent, when should we rein it in?
Probably the former, I would say, because if you agree there's a point, and obviously it's a hypothetical, of course, it's not like a tomorrow thing, but I guess I'm wondering what qualifiers you're looking for.
If I may very quickly, there's a famous cartoon that you will often see on the internet. I can't remember the name of it, but it shows Martin Luther King in front of a journalist. What the fuck is his name? Montgomery? I can't remember. There's Montgomery in the name somewhere. And it's a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. in front of a vast destruction, like a vast ruin of a city block. Okay. While he was active, Martin Luther King Jr.'s movement was not perceived by the general public as simply nonviolent. It wasn't even necessarily viewed as nonviolent by the vast majority of people. So one of the problems you're up against here is that your empirical data, despite the fact that, yes, we all concede to the data that says, however problematized their identity of violent versus nonviolent is, and however however various it is depending on the paper you're citing, there does seem to be, in particular conditions, advantages to nonviolent protests, and none of us would disagree. Obviously, nonviolent protests have succeeded in some cases. There are cases where it works. Nonetheless, if you're going to say that categorically nonviolent protest has an advantage in terms of optics, if your empirical cases, especially the major ones, did not actually have that optic while they were operative, that's a bit of a problem for you.
But
that kind of removes your empirical basis.
That cartoon you're referencing was a piece of right-wing propaganda that failed, though.
Yeah, it didn't work.
That optic did work. Like that's why the thing that went all around the country, even internationally, were those images of peaceful protesters getting beaten up by cops. That was the entire message. Was that these peaceful protesters who were all suited up and just trying to absorb the blows are just taking it.
Hang on. What is your basis for saying that, though? You say it doesn't work, but
what did I say? It doesn't work.
The civil rights movement was passed.
Like the civil rights succeeded. That's what I mean.
Yeah, they got the legislation passed. This was like one of the most successful decades in like African American history. No?
I think that the appeals to international audiences is, I think, separate from how it was perceived in the United States itself, because what reaches overseas is not necessarily going to be like the propaganda that's influencing the average American person, because though amongst Americans, MLK was super unpopular.
He was,
but his
popularity
were
his popularity got quite big towards 65, and then it dropped again after, because a lot of movements which were not MLK's did become violent. Yeah. So the Vietnam protests. But no, the impression generally was that although you're right, most Americans didn't support the demonstrators at the time, especially like freedom riders and all that, but they still grew in favor of civil rights legislation, and the people they were more appalled by was the cops and the segregationists, because they were literally fucking burning buildings down, and like they blew up a church that got 4 black kids killed. Like that was what the people really condemned.
Yes, and let's not forget, right? Like,
okay, but what you're pointing to, though, is that in the absence of that extreme violence, that not taking place, that's violence by the opposing side. But suppose that hadn't happened, your argument falls flat on its face. Fortuitous, I suppose, if those 4 black kids were killed, your strategy works.
So it depends on which issue, right? The bus boycotts worked because no one used violence on either side. They just bankrupted a bus company, and then they were forced to desegregate. But no, you're right. Like Albany failed because the cops were being really strategic, and they didn't strike the protesters. So that's true. Yeah,
See,
like I mentioned that earlier.
This is the
I don't
issue
think they were
here,
even
is that
forced to desegregate.
The morality of the thing has.
Well, it was negotiated after the boycott. No.
One of the problems
I'm pretty sure the negotiation was to bring it in line with other southern cities.
Which was desegregating, though.
No, it was not, because in Montgomery it was specifically, there was a specific version of segregation in Montgomery. So in most other southern cities, it was seating whites front to back and blacks back to front. And then wherever you met in the middle, that was whatever, right? But in Montgomery, there was like a specific 10-person seating arrangement that was like a middle area where, which was supposedly for everyone, but black people were asked to leave that middle area even when they had the right to be there. So like there was a very particular thing that they were fighting against. They didn't even fight for full desegregation of the buses. They fought for a different kind of
Well, what about the diner sit-ins?
It was a success. That bus boycott was considered a success at the time, though, wasn't it? They did push to get like the change without violence on either side. That's all I was saying.
Right? Yeah, but
I'm not right. Yeah, okay, sure.
My point is that it was really modest. It was not desegregation. It was a different kind of segregation.
So yes, sometimes you don't get every single thing you want in the first time. It's an incremental process, and people don't like that. But incrementalism absolutely works, and it's slow and it's frustrating. But that's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. Okay, you don't try to shove it all down your throat all at once. But the problem we're getting into here
what
is
are you
like
talking about
incrementalism and why it's based. So, but the problem.
Hang on, but.
So
explain how that.
Just saying, well, it only got some success. So can we really characterize it?
I mean, that was true before the
working?
50s as well. Before the 50s, they had Brown versus the Board of Education, which was that ruled segregation of schools unconstitutional. Yeah, there were loads of steps taken even before the 50s.
To be clear, I'm not saying it was unsuccessful. I was just disputing what was said. I was correcting the record on what was being said about it. That it was a success in that it got the buses desegregated. It was not a success in that the buses got desegregated. It was a success in that they aimed for something pretty small and they ended up getting it.
It's desegregation. Let's say that. How's that? Is that better?
Their broader goal. I mean, that was personally the broader goal of many of the movement leaders, but it wasn't the explicit strategy that they were employing. They were not going for that. They were not arguing for that to be the case. They were not asking for that. They were asking for a different kind of
Yeah,
segregation.
it was a first step in a larger plan and a larger movement to get eventually civil rights in general, right? And it's still, to be clear, right, I don't think that the civil rights movement and the civil rights era fully got 100% of what it wanted or what it needed. I think there's still work we need to do, but I think that we can point to it as
There's still work we need to
resounding
do. What are you
success
referring to? What do you have in mind?
No,
when you
wait,
say there's
sorry.
still work
Like,
we need to do?
the timeline is well serious. So the company did what you said, but then they actually did desegregate fully in '56, right? So that's the incremental. Yeah.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah, one
that's
thing
fair.
at a time. Yeah. This is a nice conversation, isn't it?
Did we ever get answers from the question that Vaush asked?
No, I have no
I was gonna
goddamn
say that
idea.
if you have one. I wanted you the threshold, right?
Yeah, at what point? Because the reason I asked this
okay.
is because the deference to public opinion isn't really a reliable metric in the time. Depending on which polls you go by, something like 80% of whites didn't think that protesting would help the blacks' cause back during the civil rights era. And, I mean, in retrospect, we understand that protests were good anyway, but how do you make these determinations about whether or not any protest is viable or optically beneficial, or if violence is the right answer?
I think a really good example of that is Mandela, because I like citing those people because they're like very successful at what they did, right? Is that they tried nonviolence for a very long time, but it was only after every like other nonviolent avenue had been exhausted that they resort to violence. And that's usually because you get to a stage, whether it's like South Africa or Palestine or wherever, where violence basically becomes inevitable and you have to do something with it, which is what the ANC did. But that was, I mean, the threshold for that was like, I think Mandela adopted violence after the government forcibly removed 60,000 people from a village in neighborhood in Johannesburg because they thought they were making the city too black, which is an insane threshold.
I think
right?
one
Like
of the
forcible removal.
one of the assumptions that's kind of
would love
undergirding
to
a lot
answer
of this, one of the assumptions that kind of undergirding a lot of this discussion, is that nonviolence is efficacious, presuming that the protest is only against policy and not, for example, as in the case of the Iranian Revolution, against interference from some kind of colonial metropole. Your very country, not you, Lonerbox, of course, is established by means of very violent protest.
Oh, are you talking about the Revolutionary War?
I am,
right?
yes.
Yes, I will cede that prior to World War II, prior to the advent of mass media, the variables were changing.
No, of course, but you see the fundamental weakness of your position, though. You have to presume that the people who are protesting want the status quo to persist, but nonetheless.
Why do I have to assume that?
Well, because the power, because you're offering
with you every time.
Well, no, because your arguments presume that all that is taking place is a shift in policy by the same
That's
powers.
not true. My
yes, it is.
Even if you want leadership change, let's look at what happened in, I think, Serbia back in '98, where they basically ousted the leader who tried to steal the election. Basically, the Butcher of the Balkans at the time tried to basically steal the election entirely. In that protest, entirely nonviolent, keep in mind, was actually successful in regime change, which is far better and far more far more ambitious than simply policy changes. I'm talking about things where there's a secession of territory, like where occupation of a territory stops. Okay, these things work both on the policy level and also on the broader overhaul, more kind of revolutionary level, if you will. The problem is it works whether your cause is just or unjust. We see a lot of very fashy, very bad actors adopting a lot of the Rules for Radicals playbook and a lot of these the playbooks of the more nonviolent resistance, civil resistance, to success, right? To their benefit. And this is a problem that I think that researchers are dealing with nowadays, is that
but he was
ways of
he was
going
fought
about
with military
it are effective
counteraction
regardless of the morality of the thing. But I want to answer Vaush's question real quick before I forget, is that my line is when they are directly, basically it's a very high bar, I understand, but when they have removed all other means of change. So if they've prevented you can't vote anymore, they are putting you in camps, they are killing you, yeah, there comes a point where you just have to take up arms.
So after they've already succeeded in killing you is when we can start to.
Well,
to
you
rise
understand.
up.
Well, hang on, Sirius. You do need to remember the wise words of my prime minister: "When you kill your enemies, they win."
I mean, the problem with that argument is that you're assuming that violence would have saved people beforehand, which again is like that's kind of shaky, right?
I don't know. Is it?
Depends on what you're talking about. I don't really know if
agree.
like.
Yeah, but that works both ways, right?
Depends. That's.
I don't. Yeah, but let's say you know that stupid fucking Ben Shapiro thing about if the Jews were armed, they could have stopped the Holocaust. Well, I'm like, no. If they were fucking Jews running around in 1930s Germany killing people, what do you think the response? Oh, actually, I think Jews are okay now. We'll just chill with them. No, they would have got worse, like quicker. But
Well, it couldn't have hurt. I don't know, dude. At the point where they're rounding them up and putting them into a furnace, I'd say, give it a go.
Do you think in the 20s, like Jewish militias would have been effective in like Germany?
Well,
I think it's probably quite easy.
I didn't say they would have been.
He didn't say it would have been effective. He said it couldn't have hurt.
If one time traveler could make the difference, then presumably a time-traveling militia of Jews would also be.
I'm just a painter. Why are all these people trying to kill me?
Hey, a new Netflix series coming out, right? The time traveling Jews. They're going back and solving all the world's problems. No, I think that again, the problem with violence is once you open that box, it's like starting a wildfire. You can't necessarily control what happens after you kind of unleash this thing.
Wait, you can't anyways. You already can't control what happens.
You can. Yeah. There are more. You have more options when you are less violent.
Who is you?
What?
Wick, if people in your movement are engaging in Wick, no, Wick. No, this is important. You seem to have this conception of political movements as if you're like a faction, like a unit in a strategy game, where you can just pick the non-violent option. If members of that group engage in violence, and that is then used to characterize the whole group, thereby making, for example, maybe violence the only viable option available to them, and so on and so forth. That's not true in all cases. In fact, in the vast majority of cases, you don't have the capacity to redirect a movement once it's already committed itself to a certain type of action,
if you can't
or once a certain type of action.
Okay. If you're in a situation where you cannot control what anyone else is doing, you have lost. But you always have the ability to at least somewhat control.
No individual. In any given movement, the vast majority of people, maybe all of them, can't control the direction of the movement. Whose position are you assuming when you say control the direction of the movement?
Look at the civil rights movement. Do you not think that MLK had very strict and tight controls over his
He didn't have control. He had influence. And no, he didn't have unanimous control over every black civil rights actor or every black rights actor and so on and so forth.
The reason that the civil rights movement was so effectively nonviolent across the board was because multiple organizations were not like even I think it was like the overwhelming majority of Black Americans were pro nonviolence. Like Malcolm X was just like he was represented a very small minority at the time. Yeah.
Yes, so you have that fortuitous situation, and Wick, I agree.
It wasn't fortuitous.
It was incredibly fortuitous.
Wait, no, stop.
It would take so little.
This argument that
no, it would take so. It would take. It would take so little. Wick.
No, this took
work.
It was
Wick.
Time. It took.
Wick. Wick. What Loner Box? Wick. Wick.
Eat it out.
Find your chi. Wick. What Loner Box is indicating is that there was this immense scaffolding that allowed, for example, protest doctrine to be enforced, to be disseminated.
How do you think that scaffolding came about? Do you think
because it happened to be the case that in this particular time, in this particular place, particular people formed organizations and community roots that allowed them to influence the movement of large numbers of people. That is not always the case. Sometimes, for example, protest is the result of top-down action and is spontaneous from multiple sectors at once, in which case none of these sectors has unanimous control over all of the others, and sometimes if some of them are engaging in violence, the only way to counter that violence, if you prioritize that, is to cut the legs out from the whole of the movement itself.
But again,
I think if you're talking about active violence, I think it should be quite easy. Like we can only act with the information we have right now. I think if you can just justify any particular act at a time, just do that, right? For example, looking back at Stonewall, I think that was perfectly justified because they were literally fucking raided in their space by the police for no fucking reason, right? The burning of the police precinct.
God, I love
don't
this
know
man.
if that should be after George Floyd died, right? I don't think that should maybe be adopted as a strategy, but they were perfectly justified in doing that. The state literally failed the people they were supposed to protect by letting one of their agents murder a guy. So, but
I mean,
that's
that's
just take
what
an
we're
incident.
advocating for.
But is anyone advocating the how would I put this? Fuck. I feel like I can't even ask this question.
I can
because
get
it's
behind
like
that.
Fed posting, but if we're talking about, does anyone think that America in 2023 is in a stage where violence would be a reasonable strategy?
Wait, violence blanketly? What the fuck does that mean?
Well, okay, so
You just
Well, no,
mentioned
look,
Yes, look, no. Yes, I agree. No, yes. I will say yes. Wait, yeah, but I'm answering.
Okay,
yes,
you can answer.
I agree. My preferred policy position is kill. Just kill.
Okay, memes aside, I'm curious what Doe thinks. Doe.
I need to clarify what I mean by violence.
Please.
Right?
No, I understand. Well, I want Doe to answer the question. Doe.
A deer. Continue.
Do you think that in 2023 in America, violence, in whatever form you want to define it as, is the answer here? Do you advocate, or would you advocate for violent agitation, disruption, protest, whatever you want to call it? Can you elaborate? I want to give you space to elaborate because I don't want this to be Fed posting, right? But can you explain?
I think that so I care about what's just, and I think that solidarity is the method of justice and freedom, and that I think that is a far better tactic than blanketly nonviolence. I think that knowing that the person next to you will help de-arrest you if you're at a protest and a cop starts engaging in violence against you, or knowing that these kinds of things, I think that I do think that violence is acceptable in certain cases in certain times in 2023 America. But
De-arrest as in like fight off the cop who's arresting someone.
De-arrest? Yeah. Have you ever seen a de-arresting?
Yeah, I don't know if I haven't seen one, but it's okay. So a cop's arresting someone. No, I haven't seen it, but a cop's like Just Up Oil, they're getting arrested, and other people should muscle the cops off of the protester.
Have you? This is a very common protest tactic. It's called de-arresting. You should look into it.
Well, hang on.
You don't even.
Hang on a second.
I mean, if you want other
You
people
don't
to do
even need
that,
to muscle them off. What if you just block their access to their vehicle? We said, blocking traffic is.
You're
is
committing
non-violent,
violence against
so-
the monopoly on legitimate physical violence. Serious.
Usually people push them over, push the cops over, stuff like that. That's usually the method in protests to stop them from zip tying someone or whatever. They they help break the zip ties and push the cop over.
Yeah, and then they assimilate them back into the crime.
Just going to say, first of all, do so at your own risk then, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We're not demanding sacrifice, but any good movement for social change will accept some sacrifice because that's how it goes.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, and I don't know, and this is a legitimate question. I wonder if it would be more efficacious to allow the arrest, right? Because again, we have other.
Efficacious for who?
For the people who want to do the change.
The police famously arrest people as a secret, insidious protest move in favor of the protesters because they know that arresting the protesters is only to the advantage of the protesters.
Yeah, if you could demonstrate an unjust arrest, if you could demonstrate that somehow, which I don't even think you necessarily need to interfere with the police to do so. And this is part of the martyr. This is an extension of the martyrdom idea strategy, right? If you can demonstrate an unjust arrest, that's going to be extremely effective for your movement. Whereas theoretically,
you mean if you can win?
As opposed to interfering with the police in an unjust way, in a way that is not interfering with an arrest that is otherwise not considered unjust, all that's going to do is arm critics of your movement.
No, not necessarily.
Necessarily. Physical solidarity is not an idea.
You have literally no evidence on this. Stop saying necessarily.
So, okay, can I say, because Lonerbox brought up an example of this earlier, with the contrast between the protest before Bull Connor and then the Bull Connor protests. I don't remember the exact names, but as he was saying, before that, the police were really prepared. And they arrested protesters, and they actually made provisions to send them off to off-site jails. And the protesters got basically nowhere. And it wasn't until they came up against Bull Connor, who was psycho, right? And started arresting people willy-nilly and like giving the orders to, or not giving the orders, but like the police got itchy trigger fingers, so to speak, right? And that ended up contributing to the martyrdom that we're talking about, right? So
yes, the more violent the cops are, the more it's good for your
yeah,
movement.
but that's the thing though, is right, not all arrests are quote unquote unjust, right? Quote unquote unjust from the perspective of the legal system.
So
if you need to de-arrest, what?
So I'm asking. So when you say it's not unjust, are you talking about someone who's gone and blown up a police building?
No.
How about this, Wick? How about this? How about this?
I'm talking
how about someone who cements himself in front of steamrollers and whatnot on legally sold land that is the traditional territory of some group, okay? That is not an unjust arrest in the eyes of the law. They are actually obstructing someone's rightful disposition of their own property. However, nonetheless, like they are protesting the unjust misappropriation of an entire community's traditional territory.
Sure.
Etc.
If you want to do that, but you have to. So
but
in that case, I think de-arresting hurts your cause rather than helps it.
How?
I think that allowing yourself to be arrested has a much bigger.
Because the criteria for being able to use an unjust arrest as a protest move is predicated on being able to establish it as unjust before a general public. But the general public is presumably going to be the general public of some legal system, right?
No. Because what you're doing when you allow yourself to be arrested is you're highlighting and calling attention to an unjust law. Look,
that doesn't follow. Does every single person
arrested for this? And police can do.
No. That just demonstrates the existence of a law, Wick. That's all.
If you want to change the law,
the goal of a protest could be to draw attention to a law, right?
Maybe the protest that's being engaged in isn't one against the law that you're being arrested under.
Yes.
For example, police officers oftentimes say this has been deemed a you're not allowed to gather here anymore. This is an illegal gathering now, even though it is a legitimized protest. They got permission from the city or whatever. They will declare it now illegal and start arresting people who are there. Like, you're not trying to change that law by protesting whatever it is you're protesting. Or whatever.
So your thesis, Wick, is that they should allow themselves to get arrested because then it will highlight the law against squatting on someone else's property. That's not what they're protesting. But they're not protesting squatting on someone.
I'll give you a real world example of this, right? So there have been
BlackRock
people who've been arrested. I'll give you a real world example. There's people who've been arrested for
why is it whenever you bring up
illegal
an example, you just like say, we have to talk about the generalities. We have to talk about the generalities. But now
we can go back and forth on specific examples all night long. And we can say, well, in this example...
But then what were you just doing, Wick? That's what you were doing. You were bringing up a specific example.
Because the general data just disproves you. And
now we're talking about the general data. We've moved from every single time we talk about the general data, problems with the general data. Well, hang on, I've got a specific example. Well, hang on, Wick, but the general... No, but you can go back to the general data all you want. Okay, fine. Well, there's a specific example. We have a counter-specific example. Well, the specific example doesn't establish anything. We have the general data.
I think there's a difference between using an example to point to as a representative example versus using an example as either a typification of how things can. Well, yeah, basically that, versus using an example as a typification or an example of how things can work. Or
that's what I was doing. On you having demonstrated that it's a representative example. And
well, no, that's what I'm saying is that's the examples that Wick has protested again have been in the context of using them as arguing them as representative or applicable to a more representative.
But you have to lay the groundwork for them being representative. You can't just say this is representative and then.
He's saying that ours were unrepresentative, and that's what Wick was pointing out. But I don't think that that's true because the entire thing that we've been saying is not that these are purely representative of every single social movement, but that these are events which occur and which you cannot just dogmatically refuse on the basis of nonviolence because many of the biggest ones are they still have to do with violence.
I've already ceded the ground that there are specific incidences right? There are specific scenarios, there are specific contexts where violence is not only justified but moral as well.
We win.
It's
Boom.
not only moral, but
Good job, gang.
But that's not the argument, as I said in my opening statement. My opening statement was
You may
clear.
say so,
It's
but the name of the
not
debate is
that
nonviolence versus violence.
or that violence never can work. My argument is that, in general, non-violent civil resistance is more efficacious.
But you haven't established this. In fact, every single state that exists, every law-giving entity was established by violence. This is why sociology generally refers to states, refers to law-giving entities, refers to authorities and sovereigns as those who hold a monopoly on violence. Why? Because it is violence which establishes the case in every
But
single
by that
case.
definition of violence, voting is violence, and no one understands voting to be violence, so come on.
Well, also, the appeal to history and the creation of states is a little weird, because a lot of states were authoritarian, regimes were overthrown, wars were had, like, none of us are saying that in the, like...
They were overthrown, really? Were they peacefully overthrown? Were these regimes overthrown by non-violence? What are you referring to?
Well, in some cases, yes, but no, that's generally... That's my point.
In no cases. Never in the history of mankind has a state been overthrown non-violently.
That's
I don't think.
Not true, but that's not even my point. All of us agree.
But you
here.
said it.
And Letterboxd, I'm sorry. This is about.
No, but that's a concession. That's a concession that damns you. Because what you just But Mr. Professor Meat.
Wait, hold on.
Me first, then Meat.
Go ahead, Professor Meat. Go ahead.
Traitor.
What I'm saying is that no one here is saying either that there is no situation in which a war is justified, or that the overturning of an authoritarian state or something like that is never justified, and none of us are saying that if you decide in any case in history to do those things, that violence is not a reasonable way to do it. Of course, if you're going to literally overthrow a regime and institute a revolution, violence is justified. That's not the conversation.
So what you're saying, to be clear, is that violence is only justified in cases. Violence is only unjustified in cases where you're trying to make particular policy changes, but not for some reason in cases where you want to overthrow the entire normative structure.
Well, I think.
Well, no, I'm saying specifically that violence is justified.
No, but here's the problem, though. No, but here's the problem. If you concede that in history we have myriad cases of entire legal systems being overthrown and restructured and reorganized, etc., by violence. Well, that's basically it. That makes it an intrinsically efficacious force.
Well, yeah, but if we're talking about a protest, the point of a protest isn't to do a insurrection. That's an insurrection.
Well, that's not entirely true. So, for example, hang on. Wait. The Iranian Revolution was cited as an example of peaceful protest earlier.
It was.
That was precisely that, though.
Alright, so you're telling me a minute ago
it
when
was
you
a
said
revolution that was not-violent, and we can point to that overthrew a regime.
Yeah,
No, I would define that the Iranian Revolution was peaceful.
Wait. Okay, Wick.
Yeah, so again, you cited that there's been no regime change that has happened that has been non-violent, but again, we can point to the 1979 revolution in Iran. That was entirely non-violent.
But it wasn't entirely non-violent. It wasn't entirely non-violent. Wick, how did the Shah... hang on. How did the Shah get ousted? Was he elected out of office? You don't know, of course. No, he wasn't. It was not a non-violent thing at all. It was marked by frequent attacks by the secret police against, for example, funeral arrangements and so on and so forth.
Again,
it was not non-violent.
That didn't help the state, it hurt the state.
We're not talking about whether or not the state was violent. We're talking about, I think it's pretty standard history that the Iranian Revolution, like on the revolutionary side, they were mostly, not completely, but mostly non-violent.
Okay, but that not completely part is important because the non-violent part didn't take over the state.
Is that true?
It absolutely did.
I read up in this the last
Khomeini
time.
got like 90-something% of the vote. Right?
So basically what happened is that because the Ayatollah stressed martyrdom as an Islamic principle, the protests were generally oriented around nonviolence. However, they were marked with frequent rioting, and the closer they got to actually taking over the government, the more violence became like an act of the state. So for example, the Ayatollah worked initially alongside communist and secular groups like the Revolution or the National Front, I think. But then the closer they got towards actually achieving the full insurrection, the more sort of institutional violence got cemented. And then, of course, when the Ayatollah took reign, there were mass killings of the people who previously worked with him.
Yes, and guerrilla warfare was frequent. Sorry, go on, Doug.
Oh, I think I was actually.
Oh, was that
Doe,
you?
were you gonna say something? I think I was
No,
gonna say
you're good.
something. Yeah. So what I was gonna say is that like I think the Iranian Revolution is also interesting insofar as it necessitated, at least at the end, violence against part of the protest movement, right? Like they required it. Like, how do you think they suppressed the communists and their former allies after they overthrew the government? Like they
I
had.
think it would have been better if they hadn't.
I agree I agree that it
So
would.
well, I just what
But
do you
what
what do
do
you
you
mean
think?
necessary?
But you're talking about success, are you not?
Mhm.
You're talking about success. Do you not agree that part of the
I'm
quote
just gonna be
unquote
real. A
success?
fascist theocracy, right, is not my definition of total success. It's partial success, right?
No,
But-
no, in the literature, when you say success, we mean achievement of
They achieved
movement
their
goals.
goals,
We don't
Do you
mean
think they
we
would have
like
not
the goals.
achieved? Do you think they still could have achieved their goals without killing the communists? I think they could.
I don't think that they would have been nearly as successful because then they would have had
agree.
another political bloc that they would have had to contend with.
I feel like I added too much in that last, so I'm going to balance it out and provide an example of what could be argued to be an insurrection that was properly nonviolent. The People Power Revolution in the Philippines, which was an effort to oust a corrupt leader and succeeded, an end to a 20-year dictatorship. A famously peaceful series of protests. You can look it up. Enormous participation. Obviously, there were riots in the course of these protests. It's fairly inevitable, but the character of them was overwhelmingly peaceful.
Yes,
I think
and we can look
Armenia
at the-
2018 is another good example as well. That was like that was a very peaceful revolution. Yeah.
in the Serbian in the 1998 again. I'm going to refer to that. We can go example and over example of this, right? So your characterization of every single state has come to power through violence is just not true.
And it doesn't even matter because if, like, assuming that it is justified.
Well, hang on.
No one here disagrees that
Slow
assuming
down.
it is justified to have a revolution, that you can't use violence. No one here thinks that.
The state is that entity which obtains a monopoly on the legitimate force of violence. It becomes a state by assuming that role of
Yeah, but your original point
That doesn't
was
contradict
that
the fact
history.
that the events before they changed power is like mostly nonviolent, right?
That's
Yeah, your point was that
Like if I say
throughout
that the
history-
Armenian Revolution, was mostly nonviolent, and you say, but they adopted the state.
but
which
if the
means
key,
violence,
no,
that's
but
really
if
contradictory.
the critical moment involves acts of violence that give it the control of the state, and that's what cements the success of the movement, then the success of the
Well, yeah,
movement
like as soon
is
as the Ayatollah took control in Iraq.
Similarly, but we don't even need
yeah.
something that strong. So, for example, in order to like dogmatically hold to the idea that nonviolence was sufficient, you need to be able to go back and say, well, at any given point, if the circumstances which permitted the success of this movement involved violence by any other actor that was more or less on side, you basically have to assert that it would be impermissible, strategically or morally, to manufacture that if that wasn't present. If for whatever reason that event did not fortuitously take place. That's a very strong claim you have to make.
So again, you keep acting like we have to prove that in every single situation, nonviolence is the answer, and that's absolutely not what we have to do.
Well, that's
All
not.
we have to
Well, hang on.
demonstrate- all
We don't have to.
show
We don't have
is that
to.
in most cases,
But you haven't shown that in most
There's more.
cases. You have a handful at
definitely.
best, if I correct every one of the cases you provided.
again, after post World War II, let's be clear. And again, I can cite the works of Erica Chenoweth, who has done
After post-World War
longitudinal
II.
study over
What?
1,000 cases of not longitudinal. My mistake. I misspoke. She's done with a large sample size of events from 1900 to 2006, and we can again, as she identifies it, the nonviolent civil resistance movement was more efficacious, especially after World War II.
Could I ask a question? Sorry, if we're talking post World War II, because obviously the world's very different. Is there? I'm genuinely asking. I don't know. Is there an example in the United States post World War II of a movement achieving its goals through violence, predominantly?
I think that depends on who you ask. There were elements of the anti-war protests with Vietnam that were decried as violent by hawks and conservatives, but I don't think the movement as a whole would be considered violent.
Wait, why are people saying Stonewall? Was that like?
Did they I
Was
think
that
there's
the?
some
I
property
feel like
damage.
Stonewall was a pretty big exception in the movement, to be honest.
Are we presupposing success? Because most movements do fail.
True.
Yeah, but that's why I'm asking if like there was any predominantly violent movement in the U.S. that achieved like a particular legislation or.
I want
like a
Sirius
political
to
goal.
weigh in on this because I'm pretty sure he quoted Chenoweth directly counter to this.
Yeah, I'm actually looking for that quote as we speak. So
Find it, please.
Regardless, I don't know how important it is that anything be done purely with violence or as like
No, we've been willing.
with,
Yeah.
like
We've been willing to
It was
concede from
like
go
a
that
part
there
of
are
the strategy,
contextual.
right?
Okay.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, I have the quote, right? So this is from a 2023 paper by Chenoweth. So this year.
Can you DM it to me too, so I can read
Yeah,
the
sure.
context?
We have like even in the abstract, we have suggests that organized armed violence appears to reduce the chances of otherwise nonviolent movements to succeed, whereas unarmed collective violence has more ambiguous effects. So even Chenoweth doesn't have like this absolutist stance that you attribute to her. I sent it in the group chat.
So,
and like
again,
she reviews multiple
she's not
studies.
saying, and again, she is not saying that in every case violence doesn't work, and in every case nonviolence does work. She absolutely doesn't. Say
Also,
that.
What she's saying is that there is an advantage sometimes, at least some studies.
Do you have a word count, like a page where this quote is?
It's not page.
I've been.
but
I
it's in the abstract. You can look in the abstract.
I have two things to say very quickly. First of all, I do need to dip in the next 10 minutes, Vaush. Thank you very much once again for covering. But secondly, I am woefully ignorant of the Filipino People's Revolution. People Power Revolution, rather. But I'm reading the history of it briefly, and it seems like there were some key assassinations and acts of violence that were critical to the success of that movement as well. I don't think we can really litigate that, but I think it's once again, it is too simplistic to say in any particular case that nonviolence dogmatically, or violence dogmatically for that matter, resulted in the efficacy of any particular movement. Every single one is going to be leaping off the shoulders of some act of violence or some event from before. And in the absence of that, you cannot say, for instance, in the absence of any act of violence that allowed, like nationalistic violence, on the case of Indians long in advance of Gandhi coming out of the scene as a relevant actor. That's going to pave the way for that later movement to be successful. The adjacent attacks on the British by the Indian National Army, that's going to be a critical part of the efficacy of the anti-violent movement. And the critical problem here is that in order to say otherwise, you have to conjecture an alternate universe in which this didn't occur, in which these movements were successful in isolation from these things which were an intrinsic part of the ambience. And one of the weaknesses of a debate format like this is that none of us are going to have an encyclopedic knowledge of any of these cases. But every single one of these cases are going to be hyper-particularized by their environment, which will include the nonviolent action and the violent action that each conditioned the responses by outsiders that made the movements either efficacious or made them sympathetic, etc., or made them alarming enough to even be paid attention to, etc., etc.
So I will read this quote from the abstract, the role of violence and nonviolence resistance, and this was published in 2023. The balance of empirical evidence suggests that organized armed violence appears to reduce the chances for otherwise nonviolent movements to succeed, whereas unarmed collective violence.
Organized armed violence is very specific,
effects.
though. Organized armed violence is very specific.
You gotta let me finish this, right? I'm giving you the whole.
But
quote.
it's fraught
whereas unarmed collective violence has more ambiguous effects. This is no way suggests that it is beneficial. It's simply more ambiguous than the violent, organized armed violent resistance. So
but
no,
but
hold on. If you don't read the article,
honestly, I think framed by you. Serious.
I'm not trying to dishonestly frame. Okay.
I understand you may not be trying to, but it is given this impression that is not substantive, at least by this quote.
Wait, explain what that quote means.
Paper.
Explain what the quote means.
Sure. It means that whereas we could see a clear distinction where obviously armed, violent, organized militias, groups like that are detrimental to the success of a nonviolent movement, when it comes to non-armed, otherwise violent movements, the data is more mixed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so, in what respect is it mixed, though? Because if you read the full article, she talks about the different studies that have looked at
I haven't read the article to let you know, so I can't speak on that. But when you say that when I asked for the quote and you gave it to me from the abstract, that's all I can go off of because I don't have time to sit here and read it.
So maybe you don't trust my retelling of the paper, but what I'm saying is that well, never mind then. You can.
No, I don't trust it. That's not a dig on you. That's not a dig on you. I just don't trust anyone to tell me what a paper says. I want to read it myself, right?
I think it means he's skeptical as a baseline.
All right. Well, I mean, this is my reading of the paper, is that if you look at the studies she reviews for that claim, there's a couple things. So first of all, sometimes studies have actually contradictory conclusions. But in other cases, what she reviews is that different studies have different focuses and focus on and have different ideas of what success or failure means, right? So in such a case, you need to weigh the long-term outcomes for yourself. It can't just be, it's not just that they disagree on effective versus not effective in the same respect. They're talking about different respects in which something might be effective. That's why it's ambiguous, is because sometimes for some movement goals, it is effective, and then for others, it's not. So that's what I mean by what I'm doing, which is taking an anti-absolutist approach, where I don't think that we should take violence off the table, even in mostly non-violent movements, because a violent flank can have effects that are beneficial to the overall movement, even if the rest of it is non-violent.
I understand that we can never know the future, but we can know the odds. And again, if you had to bet your life and you had to bet your movement's success on things, we can play the odds here.
But we can't, though. The odds are conditioned by the data, which is conditioned by how we've categorized and identified all these different elements.
Well, that's what I want to know about. Is when you talk about the violent flank, is this are we treating the violent flank as if it's part of a strategy? Because again, if we're talking United States in recent history, whether it was both civil rights or BLM, in both cases, you guys were saying earlier, most Americans
I like this point. I like this point.
I haven't even started the point.
Okay, but
but also that picture of MLK in front of the burning building, I'm going to have a peaceful protest, that was put out by that right-wing propagandist. Yes. That opinion on civil rights and MLK fell as groups started to adopt violence more frequently, right? Black Panthers emerged in '66. I think a couple of the old civil rights movements had started to adopt the self-defense doctrine. And at that time, as violence was escalating, even after MLK riots, the approval of those movements started to fall. And with BLM, when the riots started, approval fell. So I feel like in the United States that...
but for example, if you didn't have radical regime change during that period...
That violent wing doesn't seem to help. It actually does seem to hinder.
No, fair enough. But by the same token, it wasn't efficacious in the opposite direction either. If you didn't have radical regime change, there's no reason to think that the civil rights movement wouldn't have been unefficacious for an additional few decades, maybe not more.
If you didn't have radical... Can you say that again? Sorry.
Given the conditions under which the Civil Rights Act was actually put into law, there's no reason to think in the absence of that it would not have been an extensively long time. Perhaps Lyndon B. Johnson doesn't win after Kennedy, and the Civil Rights Act is never put into effect. That's a possibility.
I think at that stage, I think even that. Yeah, so that is true that.
Yeah.
That non-violent strategy can only last so long, right? If MLK and the civil rights movement had been ignored for another 20, 30 years, then more people are going to become pro-violence.
But how do you know what the... Well, I think one of the problems here, though, is that in order to say that non-violence as a strategy is viable, we're sort of assuming that we have somebody who has a book of references to past protests and is making a calculation and therefore is dictating the activities of a movement, and then his dictations. No, they don't. And his dictations,
you're saying this in a hyperbolic sense.
And his dictations.
Hang on.
And his dictation.
Absolutely look towards.
We know this isn't the case, right? Because if you look at how many people talk about local level politics in America and how these crazy fucking hockey moms have all the power, and they're not there's no organization of hockey moms saying don't be violent. They just do. They go into fucking town halls and they lobby congressmen and they get quite a lot of shit done in their favor in their local level.
Organized. And in fact, one of the things.
No, but it's disseminated.
right?
The point,
Yeah.
the point, though, Wick, is that the movement as a whole, which is characterized by the media as the movement as a whole. By the way, I need to run like in 2 minutes, but the movement
Yes,
as
I think we should do our closing statements then, and you should take your 2 minutes to do so.
Damn.
Now.
Oh, okay. Well, fuck. I hadn't really thought of my closing statement. I guess what we haven't really seen here tonight is any strong argument against the efficacy of violent action in cases where, for example, there isn't a demonstrated advantage in terms of positive media portrayal, general popular sympathy towards the group that is protesting, etc., etc. We seem to default to sort of a dogmatic assertion that nonviolence has some intrinsic optical advantage, even though an optical advantage relies upon all the mechanisms that produce the optic in the first place. If you're under a situation in which your movement is held in contempt, its constituent members are held in contempt, or the media is corrupt such that it will not accurately portray your actions, your nonviolent actions have zero positive effect as representations of your movement, and therefore there is absolutely no reason to attribute any kind of political advantage to that type of action in the first place. It's not to say that we should valorize a violent action as in some way just more based, quote unquote, than non-violent action, but to take it off the table and to treat any dip into violent action as in some sense intrinsically anti-pragmatic or inefficacious is simply to condition people to cut the legs out from under their own movement if they step out of the bounds of civility politics as defined by a police state which upholds itself by violence. It is once again to prefer the violence of the state arbitrarily, implicitly, for literally no reason other than it has successfully attained a maximal level of violent efficacy, which for some reason you are not willing to allow for any other movement but the state.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Your hair is looking lovely today, by the way, Vaush.
Thank you for endearing yourself to the moderator. Wick, go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't know how to respond after that compliment, right? I will say this. It is not enough to say that nonviolence doesn't always work. Obviously, it doesn't always work. What I think I have demonstrated today, through both anecdote, intuition, and through data, is that on the whole, post-World War II, nonviolence gets things done more effectively than violence. We have to look at what happens after the protest, what happens after the change. And again, no change is perfect, no movement is perfect. There's always going to be bad actors, there's always going to be violent actors in a movement, but it's how that movement responds to it that is important. Nonviolence is both morally and effectively superior in most cases. That is not to say all cases. This is not a dogmatic approach. This is me dealing with reality as it is. People prefer stability, rightly or wrongly. That's what most people want. And that's what most people look at when they see you being a destabilizing force and a violent force. Generally, that turns people off of the movement. If you aren't ingratiated yet into the public, the way to ingratiate yourself into the public, which you want to do, is not through violence. You want to ingratiate yourself. Yeah, you want to ingratiate yourself, and nonviolence is the answer, actually.
Thank you. Doe, go right ahead.
Sure. I think to exist as a living thing is to be a force in the world, and to be around other living things means never discounting the possibility that confrontations will intensify. As you can see, our opponents have not shied away at all from their martyrdom beliefs. They do believe that oppressed peoples should wait, get beaten, get abused, get killed, get arrested, as long as it's good for democracy. Efficiency is the name of their game. They don't care about what is right or just. They have almost not at all tried to actually tackle the just question in this debate. They routinely have only talked about, effectiveness at achieving their goals, which to them is some policy change. There are far more goals. Direct action is, of course, the tactic by which you immediately get what you need by, directly. There is no mediation on the scale of the state or anything like that. If you don't want an oil pipeline there, you get rid of it. If you don't want someone to be arrested, you de-arrest them or whatever. This, of course, is not a blanket strategy for every context and every situation. This is just, I just believe that we have to remain allegiant to justice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please, Lonerbox, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it when people get things done and make improvements in people's lives. And I think it seems to be the case that in recent history, since World War II, in liberal democracies, the best way to achieve that is either through lobbying legislators or voting or protesting and engaging in civil disobedience or, prime example, the civil rights movement. And, there will always be people saying you're not violent enough, you're too much of a pussy bitch or whatever. Actually, one person who said that to MLK was Malcolm X. Malcolm X called him a house Negro. He called him an Uncle Tom. End of the day, MLK, the people he was associated with, got the legislation passed, made one of the biggest achievements in African American history, and Malcolm X just kind of sat on the sidelines complaining that not enough crackers were getting beaten up at the protest. It's literally true. There is a time and place for violence. If you're in Ukraine and your president is literally ordering cops to fire on you, yeah, you should rise up. Yeah, of course. In the Weimar Republic, I know Vaush's stream likes to talk about that. A really good opportunity there when democracy had effectively been killed by the Papen coup in 1932. That was like a perfect opportunity for socialists and social democrats and communists, of whom there were plenty, armed, to stand up. They didn't, because the KPD were a bunch of tanky dumb fucks who actually wanted to destroy Weimar democracy along with fucking the Nazis. So yeah, there's a time and place for violence. I don't think American 2023 is necessarily it. If you want to de-arrest a protester, just bear in mind it's like a felony charge. It can get you up to 40 years in jail. I know it's really easy to tell other people to do that, but just take care, right? Know the risks.
Weird slight. Very weird slight.
It's not weird. It's direct.
Thank you. Serious, please.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have that much more to add. I think that we should always be open to any given tactic at any given time. We shouldn't preclude ourselves from violence just because some people find it a little bit icky. I agree with I'm pretty sympathetic, maybe more so even than President Sunday and Doe, to talks of efficiency and that kind of stuff. But it's not always going to be the case that nonviolence is the best strategy, and we should never take something off the table categorically. That's all I'm advocating for, is that we should not categorically take violence off the table, and that even when there is nonviolent protest, it's not an all or nothing deal. It's not the case that an overall nonviolent movement is always can't benefit from having violent elements in some cases. That's all.
Thank you. And finally, Professor Meat, go ahead.
There's been, as far as I can see it, there's been a lot of conflation of terms, a lot of ambiguating of terms here. I guess I'll just say, whether it's the word violence or the word protest, if we're talking about violent versus nonviolent protesting, protesting is ingratiation. You're trying to get people on your side, you're trying to get your message out there, you're trying to get people to agree with you, you're trying to get people to want to pass a certain policy, for a certain leader to resign. It's some form of ingratiation. If you're saying that you're trying to do a revolution, well, that's not a protest. There may be protesting happening at the same time, but the revolution itself is not protest. If you're saying that there's an authoritarian regime that is literally forcefully preventing you, literally, authoritatively, forcefully preventing you from protesting, well, forcefully allowing yourself to protest is different than protesting. These actually happen on the same side. I know it might seem like I'm being nitpicky, but fundamentally these are technically different things. And in the case of protesting, in the case of ingratiation, listen, I'm not fundamentally against violence as some axiom either. I actually think I'm probably more comfortable in theory, morally, with the idea of violence, probably with the other people on my team over here. But the thing is that we're talking about categorically versus non-categorically excluding things. The problem is that when it comes to a society that are not fitting these authoritative prerequisites, where force force in the ways that me and Wick and Lonerbox would use the term, not in the most ambiguated way. When literal force and if you're existing within an actual authoritative regime, then if you're existing outside of those bounds, then you are sort of putting yourself outside the category of violence being effective in protest, because the great thing about societies that are not authoritarian regimes, are that they're sort of based upon the more liberal ideals that all societies tend towards over time, which is cooperation.
Okay. And for my part, my opinion is that all violence is bad all the time. I'm not a threat to the United States or her interests, and my only moral position at all is that crimes are wrong.
Before you go, my chat is dying to know, how's the cat?
He's doing wonderfully, perfectly healthy.
Hell yeah!
Hey, thank you for the mostly peaceful debate tonight.
I thank you all very much.
My people are moving into position as we speak.
For coming out. I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Have a good night. Thanks,
You
Vaush.
too.
Thanks, Vaush. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
You too.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone have a good one. Take care.
Cheerio.
Bye. Oh,
Now they're there.
Well, that was nice.
yeah.
Bye, Wick.
It was
Peace
fun.
out, y'all.
How was your haul? I saw some pretty hefty super chats tonight.
Most of my money came before the debate. I got about
I saw.
$336.
You son of a bitch.
Works out.
I'll get you
That's
next
on,
Sunday.
Gang, no, I need more. So if you like that content, if you liked what we did here, if you enjoyed the debate, let me know. Give me super chats, give me subs, give me bits. Follow the channel, like it if you haven't, subscribe if you have, if you've yet to do so. Yeah, if you like what you saw.
And become a
Sunday,
patron of President Sunday if you want to support an actual political scientist who's not a freeloader.
Sunday. I will say that you have given me a gift, which I am going to use from now until probably forever, where you quote unquote the BLM protests were inherently violent.
Oh,
I am going to
unequivocally,
Twitter.
every
That
protest is violent, as you and I both agree.
I'm just letting
That's
you know.
the preparation I
It's
gave
gonna
you
happen.
for the Andrew debate.
Okay,
Every
but that's
protest is
that was
violent.
a
Concede that out the gate.
A stupid point.
Well, no,
So,
it's your point. I have no attachment to the
it's
idea that BLM
meaningless.
is
It means
nonviolent.
nothing. But anyway,
Well,
I do have to
there
go.
were BLM riots that smashed buildings. Obviously, they were violent. The question is whether it was just violence or whether it was permissible violence, or whether or not the violence intrinsic in the BLM protests
No,
is enough to
most
discredit
of the
them.
PLM protests were not violent. They did not smash things. That was.
But
the
most of every
exception to the
protest is not
rule.
violent or smash things. It's
That's
only going to
not
be.
true. They're
No, that is absolutely
they're
true.
absolutely-
in any
they're
mass
absolutely
movement, in any mass movement, it's only going to be those members of the movement that interface with property or with bodies that's going to be even capable of being violent.
Not true.
Yeah, if you
Anyway,
have a crowd,
go.
if you have a
We'll
crowd,
argue
the
about
middle
this
of the
later.
crowd.
We'll
No,
argue
we're
about
arguing
this later.
about this now. Don't run away, Wick.
Don't run. Oh, fine. Look, again, there is a substantive difference where we can look at riots that happen that are.
I
very
actually have to go.
destructive.
My the people here are bugging me to let them leave. So you win this
Sunday.
round.
Zaijian, Biazimen. Okay. It's
I don't
Chinese
speak
for
French.
Bye, bitch.
Arrivederci.